Chapter 1693 Tsufu as expected of the world's teacher. Wu Chen remarked in awe. Kongshe is known not just for his unparalleled fighting prowess but his astounding intelligence as well. He played a huge role in constructing a systematic lineage for the inheritance of numerous occupations. Of the lower, middle, and upper 9 paths, he organized no less than 20 occupations. Sword Saint Xing explained with an excited gleam in his eyes. The lineage of master teachers originated from Kongshe. There was no master teacher in the world who was not filled with awe and respect for Kongshe. Zhongxian did not participate in the conversation with the rest of the crowd. Instead, he stared into the massive temple sealed within the sun as a hint of bewilderment seeped into his eyes. For some reason, he could feel something within beckoning him. As if resonating with this beckoning, the library of Heaven's Path trembled lightly, and the countless books stored within shook along with its movements. Is there an artifact in the Temple of Confucius that could upgrade the Library of Heaven's Path? Zhongxian wondered with a frown. The Library of Heaven's Path had always maintained a state of impassiveness to whatever happened around him. Rarely did it move of its own accord. Yet, at this moment, it was shaking non-stop. It had not been this excited even when he paid a visit to the Seer Guild before. Could it be that there was something that the Library of Heaven's Path desired in the Temple of Confucius? If that was the case, he would have to make sure to acquire it. The reason he had been able to advance from a nameless nobody to an esteemed expert whom no one did not know of was not because of his astounding talent, high morals, or extreme diligence. Rather, it was due to the Library of Heaven's Path. If not for the Library of Heaven's Path, it was likely that he would still have been struggling in the Qianxian Kingdom, attempting to push for a breakthrough to become a 1-star master teacher. Without a doubt, the Library of Heaven's Path was his greatest asset and trump card. No matter what dangers he would have to face, it would all be worth it if he could upgrade it further. He activated his Eye of Insight in an attempt to peer into the sun. However, despite having flown several hundred li into Tsufu, he was still unable to look into the depths of the Temple of Confucius. There seemed to be some kind of veil covering the temple, obscuring it from sight. The Temple of Confucius is located in a folded space. Until it's completely opened, not even ancient sages will be able to reach it even if they fly for over a decade, Luo Ruoxin explained. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates, better experience please click for visiting. Zhongxian widened his eyes in astonishment. In a sense, this was similar to how the sun was in his previous life. It seemed to hang directly above Earth, creating an illusion that it could be easily reached as long as one flew into the sky. But in truth, even if one moved at the speed of light, it would still take 8 minutes in order to reach the sun. If we can still see it even from such a long distance away, how big must the Temple of Confucius be? Zhongxian could not help but voice the question on his mind. The reason that was the case for the sun was simply because of its massive scale. If it was the same for the Temple of Confucius as well, could it actually be a gigantic world of its own? The Temple of Confucius isn't too big. It's a type of spatial manipulation. In truth, it isn't that far away from us, Luo Ruoxin replied. It seemed like she had quite a deep understanding of the Temple of Confucius. While they were chatting with one another, an ancient city soon came into view. The crowd quickly made their way over. The land where the Temple of Confucius was located, Tsufu. This city was not as prosperous or massive as the Empire Alliance, and most of the buildings were ancient and decrepit. However, it had a quiet and peaceful aura, giving rise to a comfortable atmosphere. If one had to describe it, it would be reminiscent of an infant returning to a mother's embrace. This is the unique aura of a celestial master teacher. Zhongxian's eyes shot up in astonishment. The aura looming in the city was extremely similar to the aura that seeped into his body during the acknowledgement of celestial master teacher. The only difference was that the concentration was many times lower. There are seemingly intangible forces that manifest in mysterious ways in the world. There is an academic aura for the academics and martial aura for martial arts. These two forces are derived from the unique culture of education and lineages on the master-teacher continent, and we collectively refer to them as teachers' milieu. If one comes into prolonged contact with teachers' milieu, one's state of mind will mature swiftly. One's thoughts will become more open and discerning, thus leaving little room for inner demons and irrationality to exist. Sword Saint Xing explained. Teacher's milieu? Zhongxian repeated those two words before nodding slightly. In truth, this unique aura was not exclusive to celestial master teachers. When a master teacher paid respects to the predecessors in the teacher acknowledgement hall, they could be bestowed with this aura as well. In a sense, it was a symbolism of culture. It was through the milieu of a teacher that master teachers were able to win the respect of the world and become the leaders of the world. Has this place always been like that? Zhongxian asked. He focused his attention on the teacher's milieu around him, and just as Sword Saint Xing had said, the aura was indeed able to bring greater sharpness and acuity to his mind. At the same time, this sparked some doubts in his mind. The effects of the teacher's milieu were astounding, such that even the master teacher pavilion headquarters was unable to compete with it. Seeing through Zhongxian's doubt, Sword Saint Xing explained, before the opening of the Temple of Confucius, while teacher's milieu still lingered in Tsufu, it was far sparser than what you can perceive right now. Nevertheless, its enhancement to one's state of mind was still rather conspicuous if one lived in the area for prolonged periods of time. Due to that, Tsufu is also known as the ancestral land of the master teachers. Most 9-star master teachers reside in Tsufu for a period of their life, not to cultivate or go into seclusion but to experience the life of a mortal and temper their state of mind. Take a look at that carpenter over there. Do you notice anything different about him? Zhongxian turned his gaze over. By the side of a street, there was a carpenter who was in the midst of crafting a piece of furniture. The movements of his calloused hands were extremely precise, as if they had been carefully measured by a ruler. Wooden shavings flew around the place. Before long, a completed product was sitting right before him. He is a 9-star master teacher. Zhongxian was astounded by what he saw. The carpenter shaved the wood with light strokes that seemed to be devoid of strength, and there was not the slightest hint of zhenqi that could be felt flowing through his body. However, the ocean-like accumulation of energy that Zhongxian could see in the depths of his dantian through the eye of insight told a very different story. Not only was the carpenter likely a 9-star master teacher, chances were that he was an extremely powerful one as well. Indeed. He's a 9-star master teacher who made his name 300 years ago. He was at Great Sage 2 Dan Oriat Body Realm back then, so there's no doubt that he has grown much stronger by now. Sword Saint Xing replied. An Oriat Body Realm cultivator doing carpentry? Zhongxian could hardly believe what he was hearing. All along, he had thought that great sage experts were extremely rare among mankind. Yet, who could have thought that even a carpenter that he encountered on the street within Tsufu would have reached such a level as well? Look at the fishmonger and butcher over there as well. They were all renowned 9-star master teachers in their era. Back then, they still weren't too powerful, but over the years, they have reached Great Sage 3 Dan Intuitive Impulse Realm as well, just like me. Sword Saint Xing explained. If nothing had happened to you back then, your mother and I would have come to Tsufu to try living an ordinary life as well. Through experiencing the difficulties of mortal life, we would have been able to temper our state of mind and ready ourselves for a breakthrough to higher realms. Zhongxian nodded quietly in response. Just as Sword Saint Xing had said, a lot of the ordinary-looking individuals around them were astoundingly great sage experts. They were experts whose silhouettes could rarely be seen even within major clans, but in Tsufu, they were as common as cabbage in a wet market. It was no wonder Tsufu was known as the ancestral lands of the master teachers. It seemed like there was indeed a basis to it. Sword Saint Xing suddenly turned to look at Zhongxian and asked curiously, right? Xiena, what's your soul depth at the moment? If you wish to advance your cultivation as a master teacher, raising your soul depth is of the utmost importance. If your soul depth isn't up to par, your heart won't be calm, and your will won't be pure. Pushing your cultivation ahead will become much harder and harder. As long as one had a high aptitude, sufficient cultivation resources, and a good teacher, one would be able to advance one's cultivation rather swiftly. However, tempering one's state of mind was a step-by-step process that could not be rushed. There was no way to forcefully hasten the process, and any attempts to do so would likely end up bad. His son was incredibly talented, But that did not change the fact that his son was only 20 this year. To become a 9-star master teacher at such an age, he could not help but wonder how high the soul depth of his son was and how he had managed to raise it so quickly. My soul depth. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before replying honestly, 29. 1. Chapter 1694. The importance of soul depth. Having undergone the 5th acknowledgement of celestial master teacher and stumbling across many fortuitous encounters, he had been able to raise his soul depth considerably swiftly. It did not take him long to reach a level comparable to 9-star pinnacle master teachers. Most likely, the only master teachers who could surpass him were Yang Shi and a couple of others. 29. 1. Hearing that number, Sword Saint Xing's lips twitched. He had thought that given how fast his son's cultivation had grown, his soul depth would have difficulties trying to catch up. Who would have thought that his son's soul depth was actually much higher than his? How did you cultivate your soul depth? Sword Saint Xing asked in astonishment. It should have been extremely difficult to raise one's soul depth. Even with the assistance of a cultivation technique, it still takes tremendous effort and time in order to do so. It was common knowledge that the greatest limiting factor to a master teacher was their soul depth. In order to experience the vicissitudes of life, Yang Shi concealed his identity and wandered the world for many years before he managed to raise his soul depth so high. On the other hand, his son was only 20 this year, and he had spent his earlier 19 years in a place as remote as the Qianxian kingdom. How could his soul depth be so high? How did I manage to do it? Zhongxian frowned slightly upon hearing such a question. I don't really know. I have never cultivated my soul depth before. It simply grew naturally. Hearing those words, Sword Saint Xing's face flushed completely crimson, and he nearly spurted blood. Are you telling me that your soul depth grew to 29? 1 naturally? Seeing how traumatized her husband was, Sword Saint Meng could not help but burst into laughter. Of all people her husband could ask, he just had to ask their son. Was he not asking for a mental trauma? The first time that they reunited with their son in the Empire Alliance, their son had only been at St. 8 Dan. However, within half a month, he was already an Aureate body realm consummation expert. To attempt to compete with a prodigy of such a caliber, was it not obvious that he was asking for it? Is there a problem with my soul depth? Zhongxian asked. To be exact, calling it natural growth was not entirely accurate. However, it was true that he had never cultivated his soul depth before in order to raise it. The Golden Page, acknowledgements of celestial master teacher, soul tempering of a mentor's calligraphy, sudden bouts of inspiration, each and every time that he encountered one of these, his soul depth would increase by 1.0 or even more. Given so, it was no wonder that his soul depth had risen to 29. 1 so quickly. There's nothing wrong at all, Sword Saint Xing replied with a stifled look on his face. While others ground themselves down to the bones in order to raise their soul depth by just 0.1, this fellow was actually able to raise his soul depth to a level comparable to Yang Shi without even bothering to cultivate it. If other master teachers heard that, they would surely lose all motivation to cultivate. Having stayed quiet all this time, Wu Chen suddenly spoke up. You won't be able to reach ancient sage if you allow your soul depth to simply grow naturally. You need to temper it in order to make your state of mind more wholesome and resilient. Only then will you be able to advance further in your cultivation. Does soul depth play a role in pushing for a breakthrough to ancient sage? Zhongxian frowned. Strangely enough, neither the 3 premier clans nor the master teacher pavilion headquarters had any books relating to ancient sages. As such, he knew next to nothing about the realm. The crux to reaching ancient sage is to align one's heart and will together with the world, thus granting one greater control over the environment. If one state of mind isn't sufficient to harness the strength of the world, one will be at risk of turning into an idiot or descending into lunacy. It's great that you are able to raise your soul depth quickly through natural means, but without undergoing any tempering, it will be nigh impossible for you to reach ancient say. Wu Chen seemed to be really familiar with this matter. Then again, considering that he was a sempiternal realm cultivator just like Yang Shi, it was likely that he had been seeking a way to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage all this while. It would not be surprising for him to be well versed in such knowledge. I see. Zhongxian nodded. He had an otherworldly demon ancient sage corpse in his storage ring. While he had no idea how far he was away from ancient sage, he could roughly fathom how powerful ancient sages were. Even after the ancient sage's death, the other party's body remained so heavy that he had difficulty trying to lift it up. At the same time, the imposing aura that the other party emanated made it difficult for his primordial spirit to approach initially. These facts served as glimpses into how powerful ancient sage cultivators truly were. Even though it was just a realm of difference between sempiternal realm and ancient sage, this fine line demarcated the difference between a mortal and a deity. Naturally, the prowess of the two could not even begin to compare to one another. Zhongxian thought that the difference lay in the accumulation of power, but who would have thought that soul depth actually played an important role as well? That's not right. A doubt swiftly arose in Zhongxian's mind, and he quickly posed it to Wu Chen. The advancement of soul depth is a requirement imposed only on master teachers, right? Given so, it's unlikely for other cultivators to cultivate their soul depth. Since that's the case, how can they achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage? Soul depth was a requirement for the rank advancement of master teachers, which was the reason master teachers emphasized it so heavily. Other cultivators would not feel any need to cultivate their soul depth, and if so, would they not be unable to reach ancient sage? Ordinary cultivators do place great importance on cultivating their state of mind. Take apothecaries for example. If they weren't in the right state of mind, the tranquil heart pill they forged would be warped, thus transforming from a calming pill into lethal poison, Wu Chen explained. The same goes for other occupations. If demonic tunists fail to cultivate their state of mind, how could they possibly conceptualize their intent through music to beguile their opponents? If formation masters neglect their state of mind, how would they be able to set up highly complex formations? Hearing those words, Zhongxian fell silent. He had faced something similar to this back when he was undergoing his Dan apothecary examination. Back then, there was an apothecary who had not reached heart of tranquil water and thus lacked control over his emotions. He had attempted to forge tranquil heart pills while his mind was not in a composed state, and the pills that he produced eventually turned out to be lethal poison that could kill the cultivators who unfortunately consumed them. Find authorized novels in webnovel faster updates. Better experience please click for visiting. He could relate to how state of mind was important to a demonic tunist too. If he could not control his emotions, his music would only run amok. For example, during his demonic tunist examination at the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he had needed to make the divine cranes dance along with his zither melody. However, if he had allowed his emotions to run wild, it was likely that he would have jolted them to death with his music instead. Thinking about that, there were indeed no occupations in the world that demanded nothing of one's state of mind. It was just that none of them were as demanding as the master-teacher occupation. Before Kong Shi's era, the cultivation of soul depth was categorized under will of mind, and it was divided into many different levels. This is also where heart of tranquil water, lucid mind, unperturbed spirit, impervious will, impregnable heart, uninhibited psyche, incorruptible soul, and the like come from. Wu Chen continued on. However, Kong Shi felt that such categorization is overly complex and hard to accurately gauge. Thus, he simplified the entire model through quantifying it with numbers, which gave rise to the soul depth that we are familiar with. The model has been adopted by the Master Teacher Pavilion, with every 3.0 points indicating a new tier. 1-star Master Teachers require a soul depth of 3.0, 2-star Master Teachers require a soul depth of 6.0, and so on. Going by this, 9-star Master Teachers require a soul depth of 27.0. The requirement on soul depth is much harsher than cultivation. Those who haven't reached the required soul depth cannot be promoted, even under exceptional circumstances. Zhongxian nodded in realization. Kong Shi had simplified the will of mind model into the soul depth model, and the Master Teacher Pavilion had adopted the latter as one of its promotion criteria. On the other hand, the other occupations still persisted in using the will of mind model, which worked fine as well since they did not require such a fine distinction. Of course, Just because the other occupations did not adopt the soul depth model did not mean that they would not temper their state of mind. While both models worked fine, there were still some advantages to quantifying state of mind in the form of soul depth. It would allow master teachers to constantly track their progress in cultivating their states of mind, thus encouraging them to adopt practices beneficial to advancing their soul depth. It was due to this that the master teacher pavilion had become the leading expert in this field, and the other occupations struggled to catch up. I have been here once before, and if I recall correctly, there's a place just ahead that allows one to temper one's soul depth. It's known as the Heart Pavilion. There are cultivation techniques in there that allow one to reinforce one's state of mind, insights left behind by countless experts, and formations that temper one's state of mind. Why don't we head there to take a look? Since you have never tempered your state of mind before, you might be able to make considerable advancements through it, Sword Saint Xing suddenly suggested. Chapter 1695 Surge in Soul Depth, Heart Pavilion? Zhong Xian nodded. Let's head there to take a look. Since the Temple of Confucius had not opened yet, he had some time to spare. Given that the Heart Pavilion could help him temper his state of mind, there was no harm heading over to take a look. All along, he had been dependent on fortuitous encounters in order to raise his soul depth. However, it would not do for him to be solely reliant on luck in tempering his state of mind. It would be great if he could acquire a feasible cultivation technique that would allow him to raise his soul depth. After walking for a while, a building came into sight. Walking in, they were greeted by a middle-aged man. Greetings. Do you intend to temper your state of mind or examine it? We wish to temper our state of mind, Zhong Xian replied. This way please. The middle-aged man gestured with a smile. First and foremost, our Heart Pavilion doesn't accept spirit stones and other currencies. We only accept Saint Pinnacle artifacts as payment. Every 2 hours inside will cost a Saint Pinnacle artifact. It sure is expensive. Zhong Xian was slightly taken aback by the price. After all the scavenging that he had done, he had no lack of Saint Pinnacle artifacts in his inventory. Nevertheless, it was still a price that most cultivators would struggle to fork out, including those from major clans. Most Saint Nine Dan cultivators would not even have a Saint Pinnacle artifact, and yet, 2 hours in the Heart Pavilion would cost one such item. It can't be helped. It's extremely expensive to construct a formation and space that is safe yet challenging enough to temper one's state of mind, and maintaining it also costs a hefty sum, the middle-aged man replied. That's true, I suppose. Zhong Xian nodded. Most of the cultivators who had come to Tsufu to temper their state of mind were 9-star master teachers, individuals who possessed soul depths of 27.0 and above. At their level, ordinary illusory formations and beguilement formations were already ineffective on them. In order to exert pressure on them, the highest quality formations and artifacts had to be used. Given so, it was inevitable for the cost to be on the pricier side. Here you go. Zhong Xian tossed over a Saint Pinnacle weapon. I would like to test the effects out for myself first. If it's effective, let's go in and cultivate together. Having plundered the military resources of 110,000 otherworldly demons, there were more than 1,000 Saint Pinnacle artifacts in his storage ring. Considering that he had no use for artifacts of that tier anymore, he had no issue spending them there. The crowd nodded in response. This way please. The middle-aged man swiftly led them into a vast hall. Placed at the very center of the hall was a crystal ball. It revolved quietly above a stone platform, emanating a mesmerizing glow. The walls around the hall were inscribed with insights and cultivation techniques that would raise one's soul depth. These are left behind by the experts who have been to the Heart Pavilion to temper their state of mind. We have tested them personally, and they are all highly effective in raising one's soul depth. However, please do take caution when reading through them. If you attempt to take in too much, they could end up hindering your state of mind instead. Use them prudently, and your soul depth will surely surge ahead, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Cultivation techniques were valued not in quantity but quality. Attempting to take in too much would only end up confusing one instead. Every cultivator had their own path of cultivation to follow. The more they attempted to emulate the route of others, the further they would stray from their path. If a cultivator lost themselves in the wisdom of others, not only would their growth slow down, their cultivation might even go berserk. It was for this reason that the Master-Teacher Pavilion discouraged individuals from studying too many cultivation techniques. Of course, there were pros and cons to the matter. If a cultivator successfully utilized the wisdom of others to further their own path, they would be able to reach a height far beyond their predecessors. When you are ready, just place your hand on the crystal ball ahead and focus your attention on your consciousness. The crystal ball will process the fluctuations in your state of mind. If you reach the limits of your tolerance at any point in time, we'll immediately terminate the formation so that you are not hurt, the middle-aged man explained. I understand. Zhongxian nodded. He took 2 steps up to the crystal ball, but he did not rush to place his hand on it. Instead, he swept his gaze across the wall opposite of him. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Who? A new book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Placing his finger on the book, its content swiftly flowed into Zhongxian's mind. Slowly, his eyes lit up in excitement. By compiling all of the cultivation techniques and insights detailed on the wall together, he had successfully compiled a Heaven's Path heart-tempering art. While he had encountered numerous books relating to the tempering of one's state of mind in the past, he had never paid much attention to it. However, as he browsed through the content of the Heaven's Path heart-tempering art, he swiftly realized that raising one's soul depth was not easy. In terms of difficulty, it was much higher than raising one's cultivation, especially due to how elusive and intangible the entire field was. The typical method to temper one's state of mind in the Master-Teacher continent was using illusory formations to put one's consciousness through various turmoil. Through overcoming those ordeals, one's state of mind would gradually grow steadier and more resilient. However, this typical method was both passive and indirect. It relied heavily on luck and circumstances. Even if one augmented the process with heart-tempering cultivation techniques and artifacts, the rate of growth still would not be too remarkable. Fortunately, the Heaven's Path heart-tempering art that Zhongxian had just compiled through the Library of Heaven's Path resolved this problem perfectly. It allowed him to cultivate his state of mind directly, just like his zhengqi and soul. Let me begin. Zhongxian quickly went through the heart-tempering cultivation technique in his mind before placing his hand on the crystal ball. Wang. A shimmer of light shrouded the crystal ball as numbers surfaced on it, 29. 1. Just as Zhongxian had calculated, his soul depth had already reached a level equivalent to 9-star pinnacle master teachers. A 9-star master teacher? The middle-aged man recoiled in shock. He had thought that given how young Zhongxian was, his soul depth would surely be the lowest among the group. Most likely, that was why he had gone there to temper his state of mind. Yet, who would have thought? 29. 1. Even if he looked at the whole of Tsufu, it was unlikely that there would be too many master teachers who could match him. Yuan, seeing the middle-aged man's shocked expression, Sword Saint Meng nodded proudly. Is there anyone who has encountered sudden bouts of inspiration while tempering their state of mind here? There is. Many years ago, Yangsha visited our heart pavilion, and his soul depth was at 28. 2 when he first tested it. In the midst of tempering his state of mind, an epiphany suddenly struck him, and his soul depth shot up by 0. 2, reaching 28. 4. That matter has become a legend of our heart pavilion, the middle-aged man said. The difficulty in raising one's soul depth grew exponentially difficult the higher one's soul depth was. Beyond 27. 0, every increment of 0. One would usually require many years of hard work. It was indubitably a remarkable feat for Yang Shi to have advanced his soul depth by 0. 2 in less than 2 hours. Very few would be able to emulate his success. Yang Shi is indeed formidable. Do you have any rank board or the sort here? What is the fastest rate that a master teacher has raised his soul depth? Sword Saint Meng continued asking. We do have something similar to that. The current record holder for the fastest increment in soul depth is held by an 8-star master teacher. His soul depth was 24. 7 when he first arrived, and when he tested it 2 hours later, it had already reached 25. 7. That was an increment of a whole one. 0. But of course, it's hard to compare this with Yangshi's feat after all. The higher one's soul depth is, the more difficult it is to raise it, the middle-aged man said. Raising one's soul depth was similar to building a narrow tower. The bottom layer was always easier to build, but after reaching a certain height, the difficulty would suddenly skyrocket. Dear, are you thinking that our Xian'er will be able to break the record? Sword Saint Xing asked. It was not too difficult for him to follow his wife's train of thought. My son is a prodigy. Isn't it normal for him to break records? Sword Saint Meng replied matter-of-factly. I think you have too much confidence in our son. Tempering one's soul depth is different from raising one's cultivation. There's no way to force the matter. Sword Saint Xing shook his head. Raising one's soul depth was not as easy as taking in spiritual energy and converting it into one's strength. It was a far more complicated process, and it was highly dependent on luck. Even though his son was a prodigy, there were some things in life that talent simply could not influence. Look over there. Before Sword Saint Xing could finish his words, a shrill voice sounded. Sword Saint Xing immediately turned his gaze over, and on the crystal ball, he saw the number 29. 1 foot flickering and turning into 29. 2 foot, 29. 3 foot, 29. 4 foot. This. Sword Saint Xing was flabbergasted. Chapter 1696 Soul depth of 29.9. Not only was Sword Saint Xing stupefied by what he was seeing, even the middle-aged man was standing petrified on the spot. It looked as if he had just seen a ghost. Complete silence loomed in the air. It was just a moment ago that they had been praising Yangshi for raising his soul depth by 0.2 so swiftly, but that was the result of a sudden epiphany, and it had taken him 2 whole hours in order to do so. On the other hand, to jump up by 0.1 every 10 seconds, how in the world was the young man doing it? Even 1-star master teachers with soul depths of 3.0 would not be able to do it so swiftly. Could the crystal ball be spoiled? The middle-aged man muttered as he hurried forward to check on the artifact. However, the crystal ball was completely intact. There was not the slightest trace of damage that could be seen on it. If the crystal ball was not faulty, it meant that the changes had come from the young man himself, but was such a matter humanly possible? Wu Chen's eyebrows danced frenziedly around the place, and he looked as if he was about to lose his mind. This was not cultivation but soul depth that they were talking about, and the other party's soul depth was beyond 29.0 at that. To be increasing 0.1 every 10 seconds. He has a strong foundation for his state of mind, having cultivated every realm of his will of mind impeccably. This has made his state of mind incomparably wholesome. As a result, he faces little impediment in the advancement of his soul depth, thus allowing him to raise it swiftly. Luo Ruoxin placed her hands behind her back as she calmly explained the situation. There was not the slightest hint of surprise on her face, as if she had expected such a matter to happen. As a celestial master teacher, Zhong Xian had a strong foundation for his state of mind. Using the tower analogy once more, if the lower blocks were laid impeccably, it would be much easier to build the top layers. Strong foundation. Coming to realize what was going on, bitter smiles appeared on the faces of the crowd. This was especially so for Sword Saint Xing. He was so embarrassed that he could have found a hole to bury himself in. He had been thinking that his son's state of mind would be lagging behind due to him advancing his cultivation too quickly. However, this matter had told him loud and clear that his son's cultivation was not fast at all. On the contrary, his cultivation was having difficulty keeping up with his state of mind. Since he had already met the necessary requirements to push for a breakthrough in his cultivation, what was the point of him remaining stationary on the spot? Before everyone's shocked gazes, the number on the crystal ball finally came to a halt. 29.9. Exhaling deeply, Zhong Xian retracted his palm from the crystal ball and shook his head. This seems to be my limit. Cultivating the Heaven's Path heart tempering art, he had indeed been able to advance his soul depth swiftly at the start. However, as soon as it struck 29.9, he realized that he was unable to raise his soul depth any higher. It was as if there was a massive barrier standing ahead of him, obstructing his path forward. No matter how hard he tried to push through it, The barrier simply would not falter. He swiftly realized that it was impossible for him to break the barrier with his current strength. Watching as Zhongxian walked back in his direction, the middle-aged man's eyes were widened as though large bells. Just like that, you are already done cultivating? Normal cultivators would find even 10 hours too short for their cultivation, but this fellow had actually reached his bottleneck within just 2 minutes. Yuan. I just paid for 2 hours straight, so we should still have some time left. Do any of you want to give it a try? Zhongxian asked as he turned to the crowd. I'll give it a try, Sword Saint Meng said. She still had a gleeful smile on her face, overjoyed by her son's incredible feat. Give me a moment. I had an epiphany after browsing through the cultivation techniques inscribed on the walls, so I created one of my own. Allow me to impart it to you, Zhongxian said. You created a new cultivation technique? Even Sword Saint Meng could not help but be startled by what she had just heard. It hasn't even been 3 minutes from the moment we entered the room till now, but not only have you raised your soul depth by 0.8, you even managed to create a cultivation technique? Indeed. Zhongxian nodded, not bothering to explain the matter any further. With a tap of his finger, a sliver of his will dived into Sword Saint Meng's consciousness. Swiftly going through the knowledge that had just been imprinted into her mind, Sword Saint Meng's body stiffened in shock. As an intuitive impulse realm expert, she had her own heart-tempering cultivation technique to reinforce her state of mind. However, when she looked at the heart-tempering cultivation technique that her son had sent over, she realized that what she had cultivated previously was no different from trash. She quickly internalized the heart-tempering cultivation technique that she had just received, and it did not take long for her to fully grasp it. Let me give it a try. Taking a deep breath, Sword Saint Meng walked up to the crystal ball and placed her palm on it. Wang. Numbers surfaced on the crystal ball, 27. 3. She was a powerful cultivator, and her swordsmanship was nothing short of impressive. However, her soul depth had stagnated shortly after she reached the mark required to become a 9-star master teacher. Feeling the pressure coming from the crystal ball, Sword Saint Meng closed her eyes and began to drive the heart-tempering cultivation technique that her son had imparted to her. Catcher. The numbers on the crystal ball flickered, 27. 4. A minute later, 27. 5. Yet another minute later, 27. 6. It swiftly formed a fixed pattern, similar to what had happened in Zhongxian's case. The only difference was that Zhongxian's increment had happened once every 10 seconds whereas Sword Saint Meng's came once every minute. Sword Saint Xing widened his eyes in horror once more. If there was anyone in the world who knew Sword Saint Meng the best, it was none other than him. His wife had a fiery temper and fidgety demeanor, which made it extremely difficult for her to raise her soul depth. He had to search for all sorts of treasures that were beneficial to raising one's soul depth, and in order to cater to his restless wife, he had even designed a collaborative swordsmanship for the two of them to practice together just to temper her state of mind. Even so, it had taken a very long time before her soul depth reached 27. 3. And after that, it had simply stagnated there. For many years, it had not even moved a single inch. But at that very moment, it was increasing by 0.1 every minute. Sword Saint Xing quickly turned to his son and said, "Your heart-tempering cultivation technique." Without a doubt, this miracle definitely had something to do with the cultivation technique that his son had imparted to his wife. Here you go. You can give it a try afterward. Knowing what Sword Saint Xing was thinking of, Zhongxian chuckled softly as he tapped his finger and imparted the simplified version of the Heaven's Path heart-tempering art to him as well. Sword Saint Xing swiftly browsed through it, and a moment later, he fell into a daze. It was no wonder his wife was able to raise her soul depth so quickly. This heart-tempering cultivation technique was truly out of that world. The predecessors of the Zhong clan had created innumerable cultivation techniques in order to temper their soul depth and overcome their limitations, but none of them came close to competing with the heart-tempering cultivation technique that had just been imparted to him. The more I look at him, the more I find myself unable to see through him. Sword Saint Xing shot a glance at his son and sighed deeply. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. He knew that his son had many secrets, and he had thought that he would come to learn of them as they spent more time together. However, the closer they became to one another, the more mysterious his son became to him. It was as if his son was the embodiment of omniscience. Any cultivation technique, even the most elementary ones, when placed in his hand, would showcase extraordinary effects, transforming into invaluable treasures that the world would die to lay their hands upon. Legend has it that Kongsha wielded such an ability too. Could it be that my son is going to become an expert on par with Kongsha? Sword Saint Xing trembled in agitation at the thought. According to the legends, Kongsha had possessed the ability to understand anything that he laid his eyes upon and master any craft in a moment's time. That was actually similar to what his son was able to do. Was his son really going to reach a level comparable to Kongsha? Just the thought of it filled him with anticipation for the future. Come over. I have already reached my bottleneck, and I don't think I can go any further than this. While Sword Saint Xing was still deep in thought, his wife spoke. He quickly turned his gaze over and saw the number 29. 9 foot on the crystal ball. Within such a short period of time, his wife's soul depth had actually increased by 2.6, reaching 29. 9, the very limits of a 9-star master teacher. 29. 9 is the limit of a great sage. If you take another step forward, it will mean that your soul depth has reached a level comparable to ancient sages, Wu Chen explained. Achieving a breakthrough from 29. 9 means that my soul depth has reached a level comparable to ancient sages? Zhong Xian fell into deep thought. I'm unable to advance my zhenqi or soul cultivation any further at the moment, but I do have a golden page on hand. If I use it, will I be able to raise my soul depth by another 5.0, thus reaching a level comparable to ancient sages? Chapter 1697 Sword Saint Xing makes a breakthrough. The effect of the golden page was not just limited to smashing his enemies to a pulp. More than that, it would help him assimilate the knowledge that he had stored in the library of Heaven's Path and raise his soul depth. He had used the golden page to raise his soul depth twice, and each time, it had increased by 5.0. If he used the golden page to increase his soul depth, would he be able to overcome the 29.9 bottleneck? If it worked out, he would possess a state of mind comparable to ancient sages. He had only faced an ancient sage in battle once, and he had smashed the other party to death with his book before the other party could do anything. Nevertheless, from the other party's corpse stored in his storage ring, he was still able to roughly fathom how terrifying ancient sages were. If he could advance his soul depth further, would he gain the ability to protect himself even when faced with an ancient sage? Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Even if his fighting prowess was lacking, as long as his state of mind was up to par, he might just be able to fool ancient sages with his disguise. State of mind was of paramount importance when it came to disguise. As long as his soul depth was up to par, it would be difficult for anyone to see through his disguise. Let me give it a try. Zhong Xian thought excitedly. Recalling the state that he had been in when he first used the golden page to raise his soul depth, he closed his eyes and willed, "Increase my soul depth." There was no reaction. Zhong Xian closed his eyes once more and willed, "Increase my soul depth." There was still no reaction at all. The golden page continued floating quietly in the library of Heaven's Path, seemingly mocking him for his futile actions. "Please, help me raise my soul depth. I choose you, golden page. Crush that bottleneck before me. Push. Push ha. Just 0. One more." After wasting a minute on trying to get the golden page to work, Zhong Xian could only rub his glabella in distress. From the looks of it, it seemed like he could not rely on the golden page to raise his soul depth anymore. Cultivating one's state of mind was indeed not that easy. From the looks of it, he had to prepare himself for a long battle. If a day would not work, he would just have to use 2. If 2 did not work, he would have to use 3. Or else, half a month should surely do the job, right? If not, he could try to aim for a 6th acknowledgement of Celestial Master Teacher or something. That might work, too. Heaving a long sigh, Zhong Xian was just about to see how Sword Saint Xing was progressing along when he suddenly felt spiritual energy converging toward them. He turned his head over and saw that shortly after Sword Saint Meng's soul depth had reached 29.9, her cultivation, which had stagnated at intuitive impulse realm consummation for a very long time, had suddenly surged up, reaching sempiternal realm. Sword Saint Meng had always been a highly talented cultivator, and the reason that she had been unable to make the breakthrough before was because of the knot in her heart for having lost her son. Now that she had found her son and her soul depth had just made such a massive advancement, using the momentum built up so far, she managed to push through her bottleneck and achieve a breakthrough in her cultivation. In Great Sage 4 Dan Sempiternal Realm, the term sempiternal referred to the deathlessness and imperviousness of one's primordial spirit. No external force would be able to sway one's emotions, and with a mere thought, one would be able to tear the fabric of space apart. Such was the power wielded by the strongest experts beneath ancient sage. As spiritual energy surged into her body, Sword Saint Meng's cultivation swiftly rose. Seeing that it would take a while for Sword Saint Meng to reinforce her cultivation, Zhongxian flicked a grade 9 pill into the latter's mouth. The pill melted as soon as it entered her mouth, and a tremendous burst of spiritual energy immediately surged through her body. The bottlenecks that had been limiting her previously were instantaneously cleared out. After ensuring that Sword Saint Meng would not face any problem in her breakthrough, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. Many dangers lurked within the Temple of Confucius, be it from fellow explorers or from the traps within. It was of the utmost importance for the Xingmeng Sword Saints to become stronger so that they would be able to protect themselves. Even though he was only a transcended soul, he had already come to view the Xingmeng Sword Saints as close kin of his. He would not allow any danger to fall upon them. Turning his gaze toward Sword Saint Xing, who was standing before the crystal ball, Zhongxian saw that his soul depth was also increasing by 0.1 at fixed intervals, just like Sword Saint Meng. It did not take long for his soul depth to reach the bottleneck of 29.9. I have reached the limits for my soul depth too. Sword Saint Xing said with eyes glowing in excitement. Aren't you going to push for a breakthrough, too? Zhongxian asked doubtfully. There's no hurry. I just made a breakthrough in my state of mind, so I need to condition my state for a while before I am ready, Sword Saint Xing replied. There's no need for that. Quick, let's get it over and done with. I took a look at your condition earlier, and the reason you haven't been able to achieve a breakthrough is due to several blockages in your meridians. I have a pill over here that will help you open up your sealed meridians. With this, you should be able to reach the sempiternal realm easily, Zhongxian said as he flicked a pill towards Sword Saint Xing as well. Given that your wife has already achieved a breakthrough, do you think you have the leisure to condition your state? You are already henpecked enough as it is. Are you willing to see your position in the family plummet even further than this? Sword Saint Xing was slightly stunned by the vehement attitude of his son. Am I being looked down by my son for cultivating too slowly? OOF. It was a heavy blow, but Sword Saint Xing could not find any rebuttal at all. 1 year ago, when his son had barely started out as a fighter, he had been at the intuitive impulse realm. Half a year ago, his son had successfully reached the Saint realm. He had been at the intuitive impulse realm. A few days ago, his son had made a breakthrough to Great Sage 1 Dan introspective convalescence realm. He had still been at the intuitive impulse realm. On this very day, his son was already at the aureate body realm. But as for him, yes, he was freaking at the intuitive impulse realm. If he did not start to speed up now, he would really be overtaken by his son. Without much hesitation, Sword Saint Xing swallowed the pill that Zhongxian had flicked to him. As the medicinal energy diffused through his body, he felt a concentrated surge of zhenqi coursing swiftly through his meridians, clearing up the blockages in the blink of an eye. Following which, a powerful aura burst forth from his body. After facing stagnation in his cultivation for so many years, he had finally achieved a breakthrough. Seeing how he had achieved a breakthrough before he could even sit down to cultivate, Sword Saint Xing could not help but feel a little dazed. Was this breakthrough not a little too easy? However, he knew that this was not the time for him to be shocked. He quickly closed his eyes and began reinforcing his cultivation. Seeing that both his father and mother had reached the sempiternal realm, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to Luo Ruoxin and Wu Chen and asked, "There's still some time left. Do you want to try as well? Thank you for your offer, but there's no need for it. The soul depth of both Milady and I has reached a bottleneck. It would be meaningless for us to continue cultivating our state of mind." Wu Chen clasped his fist. "Bottleneck? Are your soul depths at 29? 9-2? Zhong Xian was taken aback. He knew that Wu Chen and Luo Ruoxin were no ordinary sempiternal realm cultivators, but he did not think that their soul depth would have reached 29.9 as well. It seemed like their background was much more impressive than he had thought. "I guess we're done then," Zhong Xian said. He turned to the middle-aged man by the side and said, "We have only used the crystal ball for less than an hour. Are you going to refund the remaining hour to us?" The cheeks of the middle-aged man twitched. While other cultivators used the entire 2 hours in hopes that they would be able to advance their soul depth by 0.1, those 3 actually took less than an hour to advance their soul depth to 29.9. More importantly, they were even asking for a refund after all of that. He swore that he had never seen anyone as stingy as that before. "What? Are you unwilling to refund us?" Zhong Xian frowned. "That's not it. It's the utmost honor of our heart pavilion to have you here. Why don't we count the hour you have spent here on me as well?" Seeing that the other party was earnestly asking for a refund, the middle-aged man flicked his wrist and returned the Saint Pinnacle artifact to the other party. It might have seemed as if he had made a loss, but the fact that 3 cultivators had advanced their soul depth to 29.9 at his heart pavilion was an invaluable advertisement for him. All in all, it was still a win for him. "That's more like it." Zhong Xian nodded in satisfaction as he returned the Saint Pinnacle artifact to his storage ring. The middle-aged man nodded in response before his gaze slowly drifted over to the crystal ball. A gleam flickered in his eye as he thought, since they were able to achieve a breakthrough in their soul depth so quickly, is there a chance that I might just be able to do the same? With such a thought in mind, he quietly shuffled his footsteps over to the crystal ball. The formation in the crystal ball had to be activated for 2 hours at the very minimum. Since the current guests were not intending to use it anymore, it would be a waste to leave it be. He might as well use it for himself. He placed his hand on the crystal ball, and after a very long time, there was still no change to his soul depth. At that moment, he realized that the advancement of their soul depth actually had nothing to do with his crystal ball at all. Chapter 1698 Luo Ruoxin's worry. By the time Zhong Xian and his group left the Heart Pavilion, the sun had already started to set. Instead of wandering around town, Zhong Xian went into one of the residences belonging to the Zhong clan to reinforce his cultivation and discern the changes in his body. Cultivation was an arduous process. It was not possible to reach the peak after just a bit of hard work. Even someone as talented as him had needed to constantly put in hard work in order to reach his current level. With the recent breakthroughs that he had made, both his Zhenqi cultivation and soul cultivation had reached Great Sage 2 Dan Aureate body realm consummation. With his Dragonbone Divine Spear and the spatial, time, and soul quintessences, he would be able to put up a fight even against sempiternal realm consummation experts. He no longer had to rely on external help, such as Kongsha's blood droplet, in order to challenge them. Over the next few days, he chose to remain in his accommodation, and he did not head out much. 3 days later, the expedition party of the Zhong clan arrived in Tsufu as well and converged together with their group. After several days of cultivation, the Xingmeng Sword Saints had successfully reinforced their sempiternal realm cultivation. If they executed their collaborative swordsmanship, they would be able to oppose even sempiternal realm consummation experts. There were very few beneath Ancient Sage who would be able to threaten them anymore. Nearly all of the Grand Elders of the Zhong clan had joined the expedition party for the Temple of Confucius. Taking a swift glance, there were over 20 of them who had reached sempiternal realm. As expected of the number 1 sage clan of the Master-Teacher continent, its roots sure did run deep. On the 5th day, Luo Ruoxin suddenly knocked on his door. "Zhong Xian, I heard that there's quite a commotion outside. Are you interested in taking a walk with me?" "Sure." Zhong Xian nodded without any hesitation. Ever since he arrived in Tsufu, he had been spending nearly all of his time cultivating. It was indeed starting to get a little boring and monotonous, so it would be good for him to head out to have a look. Leaving the residence, he found that the city had become significantly more bustling over the past 4 days. He spotted not just the master teachers and experts of the Master Teacher Pavilion but the old ancestors and grand elders of the other occupations too. Before he knew it, nearly all of the top experts of the Master Teacher continent had already converged in Tsufu. In fact, these top experts weren't just limited to humans. Quite a number of great sage beasts had also arrived in Tsufu over the past few days. Despite the massive influx of experts into Tsufu, the city still surprisingly remained in order. He did not see any battles or duels happening around. The city remained as peaceful and harmonious as it had always been. Seeing through Zhongxian's doubts, Luo Ruoxin explained with a smile, "This is the sacred land of the master teachers. No one would dare cause any trouble here. Even if a conflict broke out, they would choose to settle it outside." Tsufu was not just the place where the Temple of Confucius was located, it was also the ancestral land of the Master Teacher Pavilion. There was no one who would be so foolish as to cause trouble here and become the public enemy of everyone else. Strolling down the busy streets, Zhongxian could not help but notice how crowded Tsufu had become. He glanced at Luo Ruoxin and asked, "Say, do you think that there are any otherworldly demons here?" It was a known fact that otherworldly demon emperors had the ability to disguise themselves as master teachers, and even 9-star master teachers would not be able to distinguish them. Since both humans and beasts had already made their way to Tsufu, the otherworldly demonic tribe would not allow this opportunity to slip through their fingers. They would surely try to hide amid the crowd and sneak into the Temple of Confucius when the time came. "I suppose so," Luo Ruoxin replied with a nod. She glanced at Zhongxian and said, "After the Temple of Confucius opens up, we'll all be teleported to a random location within. This means that we won't be able to remain together. You must remember to keep your guard up at all times." Teleported to a random location within? Zhongxian frowned. Yuan Wu Chen has been gathering intelligence on the Temple of Confucius. According to what he has found so far, as soon as the Temple of Confucius opens, we will be enveloped by a formation that will randomly teleport us into the Temple of Confucius. There's no knowing where you will appear. Without a doubt, there are otherworldly demons teleporting along with us as well, so you mustn't let your guard down, Luo Ruoxin said. Yuan, I won't. Zhongxian nodded. If he was teleported into a dire situation, he would just have to rely on his disguising ability. Plus, his threat was not just limited to the otherworldly demons. It was likely that the 100 schools of philosophers bore some hostility toward him as well, and they might even intend him harm. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. He was not as helpless as he was before, but he would still have trouble dealing with a large group of people simultaneously. In the end, one could never be too careful. He did not want to lose his life before he could even make his way into the Temple of Confucius. Luo Ruoxin hesitated for a moment before taking off the pendant around her neck and passing it over to Zhongxian. "This pendant was given to me by my father. It should be able to save you if you meet any danger." The exterior of the pendant resembled crystal, but its interior was the color of fresh blood. It was an exquisite artifact. This. Zhongxian looked at the pendant that Luo Ruoxin was passing to him with a doubtful expression. He knew that there would be dangers lurking within the Temple of Confucius, but he did possess fighting prowess comparable to sempiternal realm consummation experts. Even if someone intended him harm, he had the strength to protect himself. Seeing that Zhongxian was not accepting her pendant, Luo Ruoxin insisted determinedly, "Take it. We don't know what lies within the Temple of Confucius, so the only thing that we can do is take as many precautions as possible. I know that you aren't too worried about your safety, but if an otherworldly demon successfully achieves a breakthrough to ancient sage inside and your identity is exposed to them by some chance, you will be in great danger." The identity that she was referring to was, of course, Celestial Master Teacher. Hearing those words, Zhongxian fell silent. There was some sense to what Luo Ruoxin was saying. Ancient sages were forbidden from entering the depths of the Temple of Confucius, and no one had successfully made a breakthrough to ancient sage for the past 10,000 years. However, there was a great possibility that there might be an artifact within the Temple of Confucius that would allow one to take the final step forward. If that artifact fell into the hands of the otherworldly demons, it could really end badly. It would still be fine if the otherworldly demons were oblivious to Zhongxian's identity as a celestial master teacher, but if they somehow learned of the matter, there was no doubt that Zhongxian would be their priority target. With Zhongxian's capability, he could still fend off sempiternal realm cultivators without any trouble, but when faced with an ancient sage, the only option that he had was to flee as far as he could. The disparity in their strength was simply too great to even attempt to fight back. Knowing that Luo Ruoxin was worried about him, Zhongxian took the pendant before asking anxiously, "But if I take your pendant, what about you?" If the pendant truly had the ability to protect him, was it really fine for him to take it? Would Luo Ruoxin not be in danger if so? "You don't have to worry about me. Even if I encounter an opponent I can't defeat, I am still able to escape," Luo Ruoxin reassured. Not wanting to linger too long on this topic, Luo Ruoxin remarked, "I saw Luo Chichi earlier." "Chichi?" Zhongxian was taken aback. "Is she here too?" He had not seen Luo Chichi ever since they separated at the Luo clan. If Luo Ruoxin had seen her around, could she be there for the Temple of Confucius as well? Thinking about it, it did make sense. As the owner of the Dimension Silencer, Luo Chichi boasted strength comparable to sempiternal realm cultivators. Considering how huge a matter the opening of the Temple of Confucius was, it was reasonable for her to show up in the vicinity. "Yeah. She's a good person," Luo Ruoxin said in a daze. "Ruoxin, are you fine?" Hearing the abrupt remark made by Luo Ruoxin, Zhongxian frowned. "It's nothing. I just can't help thinking that once we separate from one another after the opening of Temple of Confucius, we might never meet one another again," Luo Ruoxin said. She would usually have a lofty and nonchalant look on her face, but at that moment, a hint of worry and reluctance could be seen on her countenance. Seeing that Luo Ruoxin was worrying over this matter, Zhongxian attempted to console her. "Don't worry. We'll surely survive the dangers in the Temple of Confucius and reunite with one another." Ever since he first met her, she seemed to have been able to remain calm no matter what happened. It was as if there was nothing in this world that could faze her, or perhaps, she was simply a little detached from the world. Yet, she seemed to be particularly emotional that day. It was true that he would face many enemies in the Temple of Confucius, and the random teleportation only introduced further unpredictability to the expedition. There was no doubt that the expedition would be fraught with dangers, but he would not go down without a fight. As for Luo Ruoxin, even with his current eye of discernment, he was still unable to see through the depths of her strength. From this, it was evident that her strength was far more terrifying than his. Given so, what did they have to fear? "I guess so. Let's not talk about this anymore," Luo Ruoxin replied with a light smile. She stretched out her hand and asked, "Where is the prime amulet? Can you let me take a look at it?" "It's here." With a flick of his wrist, Zhongxian took out little amulet and passed it over. This was an artifact that they had acquired through their partnership. Putting aside the fact that she only wanted to have a look at it, even if she wanted the prime amulet, he would have given it to her without any hesitation. Chapter 1699. Entering the outskirts of Temple of Confucius. Taking the prime amulet, Luo Ruoxin stroked it lightly with her fingers. A moment later, she passed it back. "Here you go. Why don't you just take it? I can wait for you at the entrance of the Temple of Confucius, and the two of us can enter together," Zhongxian suggested with a smile. He had no intention of leaving Luo Ruoxin behind in the Temple of Confucius, and he trusted Luo Ruoxin as well. Thus, it did not matter to him who was in possession of little amulet. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience. Please click for visiting. There's no need for it. It'll be good to leave it with you. I just wanted to take a look at it. Luo Ruoxin shook her head as she passed the pendant back. "All right then. It would be great if we could use the communication jade token after entering the Temple of Confucius, but if we are unable to contact one another, let's meet at the entrance of the Prime Hall. I'll be waiting for you there," Zhongxian said. "All right." Luo Ruoxin nodded with a light smile. Strolling through the bustling crowd while making some idle conversation, Zhongxian could not help but remember the day that he confessed at Firesaw City. It felt as if the entire world had become insignificant as long as she was by his side. It was a feeling of peace that he had never known to be possible. He did not know how she felt about him, but she gave him a striking sense of familiarity. He knew that it was irrational to think of it in such a manner, but it felt like their fates were tightly interweaved together. Being beside her felt like the most natural thing to him, such that he could no longer fathom a world without her. The time spent with loved ones always flew by swiftly. Unknowingly, a day passed. They swiftly returned to their accommodations. Zhongxian was just about to bid Luo Ruoxin farewell when the ground suddenly started to tremble. Tremendous pressure abruptly descended upon Cufu, and the ancient buildings that made up the city swiftly succumbed to the pressure and collapsed one after another. What's going on? Zhongxian was taken aback. This was the city that Kongsha had resided in during his lifetime, so it was bound to be a place of great fortune. Even the Sanctum of Sages had never suffered an earthquake before, so why would Cufu suddenly suffer such intense tremors? Luo Ruoxin turned her gaze upward as she said grimly, "The Temple of Confucius is opening." Hearing those words, Zhongxian swiftly looked up into the sky as well. The second sun in the sky began to flicker non-stop, signaling that something was going to happen very soon. Following which, rays of myriad colors descended upon Cufu, creating passageways that linked the two worlds together. As more and more rays fell upon the world, the pressure on the ground seemed to grow stronger and stronger. This is bad. Sensing danger from the intensifying pressure, the cultivators who had yet to reach Great Sage hurriedly took out protective artifacts to shield themselves. Even Zhongxian felt goosebumps rising all over his body from the sheer pressure, and he quickly drove his zhenqi to ward off the force crushing down on him. Catcher, catcher, catcher. Cracks began appearing on the ground. The spiritual energy in the surroundings swiftly formed a massive tornado that swept everything toward the sky. Amid the roaring hubbub around him, Zhongxian felt a warmth sensation on his hand, Luo Ruoxin. There was a look on her face that Zhongxian had never seen before. Zhongxian, if I have hidden some things from you, will you hate me? Unable to comprehend why Luo Ruoxin would suddenly ask such a question at this point in time, Zhongxian replied, I won't. I know that you have your own concerns for keeping secrets from me, and I understand that. I'll wait for the day that you are willing to speak. Then, what if I? In the midst of Luo Ruoxin's words, a deafening rumble suddenly echoed from the sky. Following which, the entire Cufu was devoured by a brilliant white light. Ruoxin. The sight before Zhongxian blurred as he felt the warmth in his hand vanishing. He saw the world spinning around him before he blacked out altogether. When Zhongxian opened his eyes once more, he was already in the midst of a vast mountain range. He was completely surrounded by tall grass that seemed to stretch all the way to the horizon. Ruoxin. Zhongxian quickly got up and searched his surroundings frantically. However, there was not a single person in sight. Although Zhongxian was stunned for a moment, realization soon struck him. It seems like the Temple of Confucius has opened, and we have all been randomly teleported in. It was just a moment ago that he had still been in the Zhong clan's residence in Cufu, but in the blink of an eye, he was already in the midst of a mountain range. At the time, the young lady whose hand was locked together with his had vanished as well. It was apparent that he had been teleported away by some formidable force. Without any doubt, it was clearly the doing of the Temple of Confucius. Everyone that had been in Cufu should have been teleported to a random location in the Temple of Confucius. Knowing that they had just been teleported to different locations, Zhongxian's heart finally calmed down. He released his spiritual perception to sense the surroundings around him, and he could not help but nod. The teacher's milieu in here is much more concentrated than in Cufu. It was no wonder everyone wanted to come to the Temple of Confucius in search of their fortuitous encounter. Putting everything aside, just the teacher's milieu there was much more concentrated than in Cufu. A master teacher who cultivated there would find their soul depth growing at an astounding pace. The spiritual energy in here is much denser too. I have never seen a blessed land of such quality before. It was one thing for the teacher's milieu to be much more concentrated in Tsufu, but even the spiritual energy was so dense that it almost felt tangible to the touch. Even without utilizing a pinnacle spirit stone, a cultivator would be able to advance their cultivation swiftly there. Knowing that he was in a different environment, Zhongxian quickly checked his physical condition, and after confirming that his fighting prowess was no lower in the Temple of Confucius, he heaved a sigh of relief. Following which, he flicked his hand and took out his communication jade token. He attempted to activate it, but to his disappointment, he was not able to contact anyone at all. Just as he had guessed, it was impossible to use communication jade tokens in the Temple of Confucius. It felt like there was some kind of barrier around the area that prevented remote communication. Next, he whipped out his dragonbone divine spear and pierced the space before him. The space wavered a little, but it did not tear open to form a dimension rift. It seems like I am unable to do spatial leaps in here. If he could not open a dimension rift, he would be unable to construct spatial passageways and leap from one area to another. It doesn't seem like I can perform soul traverse either. Zhongxian sighed deeply. This means that teleportation formations won't work in here either. To his amazement, the space in the Temple of Confucius was actually even more resilient than that of the master-teacher continent. Despite the surge in his cultivation, he was still unable to tear the space open. Let me try flying. Leaping into the air, Zhongxian attempted to head as high as possible in an attempt to get a bird's-eye view over the entire place. However, the higher he went, the greater the pressure weighing down on him seemed to become. It was as if someone was strapping more and more weights on him. Driving his Junchi furiously, he barely reached the top of a tree before succumbing to the pressure. Hoo! He fell back down to the ground, producing a massive pit below him. As Zhongxian patted off the dust from his body, the astonishment on his face could not be concealed. The space in the ancient domain was clearly far more compact than the space in the master-teacher continent, thus making flight exceptionally difficult. Even with his prowess, he could only reach the top of a tree before plummeting to the ground. It was likely that most other cultivators would fare worse than him. He had been planning to quickly scout the area and ascertain the location of the subordinate halls and prime hall. However, from the looks of it, it seemed like Kongsha had already taken precautions to ensure that his trial would not be that easy. Unwilling to give up, Zhongxian scanned the surroundings with his eye of insight. Since there existed teacher's milieu in the air, it was likely that the prime hall was located in the area where the teacher's milieu was the most concentrated. As such, as long as he followed the concentration gradient of the teacher's milieu, he should be able to reach the center very swiftly. But very soon, after taking a sweeping gaze across the area, his face turned livid. It was true that teacher's milieu was omnipresent in the area, but to his astonishment, there was no concentration gradient at all. The concentration of teacher's milieu was equal throughout. To put it in other words, he could not make use of the concentration gradient to find the subordinate halls and prime hall. Humph. Even if Kongsha thinks that he can stop me with just this much, I still have the Library of Heaven's Path to fall back on. Zhongxian harumphed coldly as he took out a book. If it had been any other cultivator, they would have given up at this point and been forced to roam aimlessly around the area until they found a feasible path forward. However, that was not the case for Zhongxian. He still had a final trump card that he could use, the Library of Heaven's Path. Back then, when he was in ancient sage Ranqiu's ancient domain, he had been able to use the Library of Heaven's Path to find the location of the Dragonbone Divine Spear without any trouble. He would surely be able to do so this time around too. Chapter 1700 Goldface Skywolf. Whipping out a brush, Zhongxian quickly drew out his surroundings in the air and wrote out the words "This is where the prime hall lies in the 8 directions." Then, he tapped on the painting with his finger. Wang. He quickly checked the Library of Heaven's Path, but no book had been compiled. Zhongxian's face darkened. No book had been compiled. In other words, the Library of Heaven's Path would be ineffective in helping him find the location of the prime hall. This was the first time that he had encountered such a situation. The Temple of Confucius is hidden in a folded space, and over the past tens of thousands of years, there hasn't been a single seer who has been able to divine its location. Most likely, Kongsha has used some kind of means to conceal it from view. There were countless experts among mankind and the otherworldly demonic tribe alike. The Great Codex of Spring and Autumn, which Kongsha had left behind, was an artifact desired by countless people, but its whereabouts remained a mystery even after the passing of tens of thousands of years. Clearly, some kind of anti-divination technique had been cast over it to conceal it from the sights of the heavens. As such, it was inevitable that the Library of Heaven's Path was unable to divine its whereabouts. The extent of the capabilities of the Library of Heaven's Path was limited by the scope of the heavens. Where the heavens were unable to reach, the Library of Heaven's Path would be rendered powerless, too. Clearly, the Temple of Confucius was such an existence. With a tap of his finger, Zhongxian took out the prime amulet and asked, "Little amulet, where do I have to go to reach the prime hall?" Since his other idea did not work, he could at least count on the prime hall. The prime hall flew into the air and wiggled its body a little before replying, "I can only sense the prime hall when we are within 20 li of the Temple of Confucius. From where we are now, I'm not too sure." It was able to sense the location of the Temple of Confucius, but there was a limit to its range of detection. If it was too far away from the destination, it would not be able to sense its presence. "All right then. If you notice anything, send me a telepathic message right away." Seeing that even his last idea was not working, Zhongxian sighed helplessly. As someone who wielded great powers in the master-teacher continent, he did not think that he would end up being so helpless in this folded space. Noted. However, if you don't choose your direction wisely in the Temple of Confucius, you could end up straying off path, the prime amulet advised. Indeed. I have to pay careful attention to where I head to. I can't afford to act recklessly in here. Zhongxian nodded contemplatively. A moment later, his eyes lit up as he exclaimed, "Right. Do you have an idea in mind?" the prime amulet asked. "The Dragonbone Divine Spear." Zhongxian chuckled softly as he whipped out the Dragonbone Divine Spear once more. "Is it able to discern directions in here?" The prime amulet felt like it had just taken a heavy blow. "Are you certain that it'll be able to find the Temple of Confucius when even I am unable to do so?" It was an artifact created for the sole purpose of finding the Temple of Confucius. If it was unable to find the Temple of Confucius, no one else should be able to. What was the point of taking out the Dragonbone Divine Spear at this point in time? In the next moment, the prime amulet saw Zhongxian flicking his wrist, and the Dragonbone Divine Spear began spinning furiously in the air. It took a while before it came to a halt. Pointing in the direction that the Dragonbone Divine Spear was facing, Zhongxian nodded. "Yuan, let's head that way then." After which, he began making his way over with a confident look on his face. The prime amulet. The Dragonbone Divine Spear. They had both been wondering what kind of ingenious method their master was going to resort to, but who could have expected him to simply bet everything on dumb luck? "You are here to find the Temple of Confucius, not to spin the Wheel of Fortune." Ignoring the stifled duo, Zhongxian returned the prime amulet to his storage ring and wrapped the Dragonbone Divine Spear back around his waist before marching forward with widened strides. Since he had no clue where he should be heading, he might as well just start walking around and explore the area. The folded space was rich with spiritual energy, so Zhongxian did not feel any fatigue advancing forward. Soon enough, he arrived before a stream. Taking a closer look, Zhongxian could not help but exclaim in awe. What was flowing in the stream was not water but spirit essence. In other words, the spiritual energy in the air was so concentrated that it could easily condense into water and form a stream. The saint beasts on the cloud mist ridge had once gone on a rampage over their disappeared spirit essence. He did not think that it would be so readily available in here. Collect. Even though spirit essence of such a tier was no longer useful to Zhongxian, his spendthrift nature still kicked. He could not bring himself to leave such good stuff lying around, so he collected it all into the myriad ant hive nest, making sure not to waste even a single droplet. Traversing across what used to be a stream, he marched on ahead and found many medicinal herbs. Even the youngest of these herbs was at least at 1,000 years old. The oldest one that he found was tens of thousands of years old. Even from afar, he could already smell the deep fragrance of the mature medicinal herbs. It's truly a world filled with treasures. Zhongxian thought as he excitedly picked a dozen stalks. The Temple of Confucius Shore was an amazing place. It was as if treasures were littered everywhere. It was no wonder all of the experts of the master-teacher continent wanted to enter it. Dense spiritual energy, high concentration of teachers' milieu, and the readily available treasures, these were the ingredients required for one's cultivation to advance swiftly. With them, a cultivator would be able to avoid struggling so desperately outside ding ding ding. In the midst of his exploration, Zhongxian suddenly heard the clanging of metal in the distance. Without any hesitation, he dashed in that direction. Before arriving at the source of the metallic clanging, he had already altered his appearance. As the head of the 3 premier clans and the Sanctum of Sages, there was probably no one who did not know of him by now. Furthermore, as he had once been a wanted fugitive of the master-teacher pavilion, it was not difficult for one to learn of his appearance. Considering how sensitive his identity was, it would be best for him to take caution. Circling around a hill, Zhongxian finally arrived at the source of the metallic clanging. 5 men and 2 women were currently surrounding a beast, battling it. It was a gold-faced skywolf, blessed with the strength of an aureate body realm expert at birth. Once mature, it would gain strength comparable to an intuitive impulse realm expert. Of its 7 opponents, 3 were in the aureate body realm, whereas the remaining 4 were in the intuitive impulse realm. They were not dressed in master-teacher robes, and there was no emblem on their master-teacher clothes either. It was hard to tell their allegiance. Under the combined assault of the 7 experts, the gold-faced skywolf was forced to retreat time and time again. It was in a disadvantageous position, being severely outnumbered. Normally, beasts would wield far greater fighting prowess than cultivators of the same cultivation realm. However, knowing that the Temple of Confucius would be fraught with dangers, the cultivators who had come over had brought many treasures along. They tossed all of their artifacts over as if they did not cost money at all. At the same time, it seemed like the gold-faced skywolf was lacking in battle experience. As a result, it took only a few instants for the gold-faced skywolf to be severely wounded. Seeing that the gold-faced skywolf was finally coming to its limits, a young man amid the crowd bellowed, "Follow my command. We'll launch an attack simultaneously." Very well. The eyes of the other members of the group lit up. The next moment, all sorts of weapons darted toward the gold-faced skywolf. Under the relentless assault of the cultivators, the gold-faced skywolf finally succumbed and dropped dead on the ground. "We have managed to kill it." The group collectively heaved a sigh of relief. They were just about to celebrate when they heard footsteps, and they hurriedly raised their weapons once more. "Who are you?" a member of the group asked warily. "I'm just passing by the area," Zhongxian replied. "Passing by?" Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. The members of the group eyed Zhongxian suspiciously, seemingly fearing that he would steal the gold-faced skywolf that they had just killed. Seeing their expressions, Zhongxian swiftly understood what was going on and waved his hand. "I am uninterested in that beast. You don't have to be so wary of me." Considering how he had appeared a moment after they slew the gold-faced skywolf, it was no wonder they would be doubtful of his intentions. "Humph. I doubt you would dare anyway." Seeing that Zhongxian was only at the aureate body realm, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. The young man who had issued the order earlier turned his gaze back to the carcass of the gold-faced skywolf. With a flick of his wrist, he took out a sharp dagger and began dismantling the carcass. It did not take long for him to retrieve the skywolf's fangs and claws. "I played the greatest role in killing this fellow over here, so I believe none of you will have any objections to me taking the fangs and claws, right? Feel free to divide whatever's left among the rest of you," the young man said. Chapter 1701 Crimson Fran's White Tiger. The toughest parts of a beast were usually their fangs and claws. Everything aside from those two would be relatively inexpensive. However, knowing the young man's strength, the crowd did not dare utter a word of complaint. They reluctantly nodded before getting to dismantling the carcass as well. It did not take them long to dissect the massive wolf carcass. The various body parts of the gold-faced skywolf were invaluable materials, but given Zhongxian's current wealth, they were not enough to catch his eye. Besides, those cultivators had gone through a lot in order to kill the beast. As a master teacher, it would be inappropriate for him to steal their loot. From how they divided the spoils of victory, Zhongxian noticed a few subtle details. He had thought that their group had known one another prior to entering the folded space, but that was not the case. It was clear that they were guarded against one another, and in the distribution of the spoils of victory, they attempted to claim as much for themselves as possible. Despite having decided to group up together, it seemed like their hearts were not aligned with one another. The strongest young man, who seemed to serve as the de facto leader of the group, suddenly approached Zhongxian. "Friend, it seems like you are wandering around the area alone. Why don't you join our group? The area around the Temple of Confucius is vast, and there are many experts and beasts roaming around. Not only is it dangerous for you to venture about the area alone, it will be difficult for you to acquire anything good given your limited fighting prowess. We can watch each other's back in a group. Putting everything aside, the gold-faced skywolf that we have just defeated has already gone extinct on the master-teacher continent, making it an extremely rare and invaluable existence. Without sufficient strength, it would be difficult to acquire even a clump of its hair, let alone its hide and claws." The others quickly nodded in agreement. Venturing around in a group would mean having to split any loot with the group, but the Temple of Confucius was not short of treasures. Besides, it would be difficult for an individual to fend off the dangers lurking in the area alone and acquire anything substantial. Furthermore, if a stronger expert robbed him, he would be completely helpless against the other party. Back on the master-teacher continent, out of deference for the master-teacher pavilion, cultivators would dare not go overboard. However, they were currently in a folded space filled with threats at every corner. Even the arm of the master-teacher pavilion was not strong enough to enforce its rules within the folded space. One could kill a couple of people and dispose of their corpses, and no one would be any the wiser. This folded space was, in the truest sense, a land of lawlessness. The only thing that could bind one's actions were one's principles and morals. Master teachers might still feel compelled to uphold their values, but what about the other unaffiliated cultivators? What about the otherworldly demons? After a moment of contemplation, Zhongxian eventually nodded. All right. Since he had no direction at the moment, it would not hurt for him to follow this group. At the same time, it would serve to conceal his identity so that he would not draw anyone's suspicion. Upon hearing Zhongxian's agreement, the young man stood up and introduced himself with an air of dignity. "I am Mu Xiao, an offspring of the Mu clan." A hint of astonishment flashed across Zhongxian's eyes. It turned out that the young man was an expert of the Mu clan. Considering his strength, it was likely that the young man was a trump card that the Mu clan had kept hidden all this time. Zhongxian clasped his fist and introduced himself. "I am Xian Zhong, an unaffiliated cultivator. So, it's Brother Xian. It's a pleasure to meet you," Mu Xiao replied out of courtesy. The remaining members of the group also introduced themselves as well. Of the group of 7, 6 of them were disciples of major powers. Only one of them was an unaffiliated cultivator. "Let's continue ahead." After sealing their alliance, Mu Xiao beckoned for the crowd to gather, and they began advancing once more. Zhongxian noted that they were walking in the same direction that he had been intending to head in earlier, and he quietly followed behind them. This walk lasted 4 whole hours. Within this period of time, they encountered another 3 beasts wielding strength on par with the gold-faced skywolf. Knowing that his exceptional strength would bring doubts to his identity, Zhongxian adjusted his fighting prowess to match that of an ordinary Aureate body realm cultivator. The truth was that the crowd had invited Zhongxian into their group anticipating that he would possess exceptional means and treasures, considering how he was able to walk around the folded space alone safely. However, when they saw that his fighting prowess was SOSO, they swiftly lost their interest in him. Unknowingly, their attitude toward him turned cold as well. "You hardly did anything at all, so I'm afraid that we can't share anything with you this time. You'll have to try harder to pull your weight next time," Mu Xiao told Zhongxian as they dissected the 3rd beast they encountered. "TSK. I thought that he would possess some formidable means. You really can't expect anything of an unaffiliated cultivator. He hardly contributed anything in killing this beast. He has no right to take anything at all. Such discussions could be heard amid the group. Their words were particularly jarring, but Zhongxian could not be bothered to waste his words on something as trivial as this. Instead, his eyes were fixated in the direction that the beast had appeared from previously, and his eyes slowly lit up in agitation. He could not help but notice that the three beasts that they had encountered in the midst of their journey had all been traveling in the opposite direction to them. It seemed too much of a coincidence for them to all be heading in the opposite direction. Could it be that they were walking in the right direction and the Temple of Confucius lay right ahead of them? With such a thought in mind, Zhongxian immediately wanted to break free of the group and advance forward individually. However, before he could do so, a rustling sound suddenly echoed from the forest around them. Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Following which, a crimson Franz white tiger emerged from the woods ahead of them. This beast was at intuitive impulse realm consummation. As soon as it appeared, it emanated a powerful pressure that caused one's heart to jolt in fright. Everyone, raise your arms, Mu Xiao exclaimed anxiously upon catching sight of the beast. Voila! There was no novice in the group of 7. Upon hearing the command, they immediately whipped out their weapons once more and got into their positions, ready to face any enemy that would pounce on them. Roar! Seeing that someone dared block its path, the Crimson Franz white tiger flew into a rage. With a ferocious roar, it dashed right into the group. With a single move, the large beast had already demonstrated its superior strength against the group. It tore its claws down, choking a suffocating moan from the surrounding air. Ripples of shockwave burst right for Mu Xiao as though sharp sword chi. Greenwood barrier. Mu Xiao narrowed his eyes in astonishment. He quickly flicked his wrist and placed a dome-shaped wooden shield before him. It was an artifact from the Mu clan. Catcher. As powerful as the Greenwood barrier was, the Crimson Franz white tiger was simply too powerful. With another flick of his claws, cracks had already started forming on the surface of the Greenwood barrier. Pu. Unable to take it any longer, Mu Xiao spurted a mouthful of fresh blood and was sent flying. Knowing that they would be next victims if they did not make a move, someone amid the group bellowed, "Let's make a move together." Upon hearing the order, the remaining members of the group dashed forward simultaneously. Brandishing their weapons furiously, they sent all sorts of powerful attacks toward the Crimson Franz white tiger. However, they were not even able to pierce the other party's skin. Roar! With a ferocious roar, the Crimson Franz white tiger spun its body abruptly, sending the cultivators around it flying. Their pale faces and the spurts of blood showed that most of the cultivators had already suffered grievous injuries despite the short encounter with the massive beast. To think that they would be no match for the Crimson Franz white tiger even after putting their strength together. As expected of an intuitive impulse realm consummation beast, the strength that it wielded was indeed fearsome. Are we going to die here? Seeing how they were unable to breach the massive beast's defenses even after exerting their full strength, despair and horror surfaced on the faces of the cultivators. The realization that they could really lose their lives right there suddenly struck them, and this feeling left them feeling deeply terrified. Had they known earlier, they would never have ventured so deeply into the area. Just when they thought that death would fall upon them, the weakest fellow of their group suddenly strutted right up to the Crimson Franz white tiger. "I can't fly here, and traveling on foot takes simply too long. It must be fate that has brought us here together. Since our fates have intertwined with one another, I'll bestow you a chance. Become my tamed beast," the young man named Shen Zhong said calmly. Roar! The Crimson Franz white tiger was stunned. "Is there something wrong with this fellow's head? You are going to give me a chance to become your tamed beast, are you? Did your head get jammed in between doors or something?" The other cultivators were also dumbstruck by what they had just heard. All this while, the young man had not been able to contribute much even in their battles against Aureate body realm beasts. Yet, at that moment, he actually wanted to take an intuitive impulse realm consummation beast as his tamed beast. Even beast tamers would have to take several years to cultivate their feelings with a beast before they could convince it to seal a contact with them. No one knew how long the Temple of Confucius would remain open for, but it was certain that it would not last several years. Putting aside the limitations of the young man's strength, it was already an impossible feat on the sole basis of time. It was precisely for this reason that they had chosen to slay every single beast that came their way. They did not even bother to consider the possibility to taming one of the beasts and taking it back to the master-teacher continent. Given that that fellow was only at the Aureate body realm, was he not afraid of the Crimson Fran's white tiger killing him with a single slap? Before the doubtful gazes of the crowd, the Crimson Fran's white tiger released a ferocious howl and slashed its claws down upon Zhongxian's head. Chapter 1702 White Tigers are amazing, Sylar. It sounded as if the fabric of space was being torn apart. The movements of the Crimson Fran's white tiger were so powerful and swift that they produced sonic booms in the air. The blatant contempt that Zhongxian had shown it had truly enraged it. This maneuver was clearly much stronger than the moves that it had used to subdue Mu Xiao and the others. Even a Saint Pinnacle artifact would be destroyed under its crushing force. On the receiving end, it seemed as if the young man facing the Crimson Fran's white tiger had been scared silly. He remained completely stationary, not attempting to dodge the attack at all. I was still wondering what kind of expert you are, but who would have thought that you are just another coward? The Crimson Fran's white tiger sneered coldly as it smacked its claws down upon the young man's head. Wang. Contrary to everyone's expectations, a crimson explosion of grey matter did not happen. Instead, a metallic reverberation echoed in the air instead. The Crimson Fran's white tiger narrowed its eyes as it hurriedly retracted its trembling claws. It had used its full might to crush the young man's head, but not only was the young man completely fine, its claws had been jolted numb instead. In an instant, the Crimson Fran's white tiger realized that even though the young man appeared to only be at the Aureate body realm on the surface, his strength had already far surpassed it. Roar. With a low growl, the Crimson Fran's white tiger turned tail and fled. What the heck is this? It had just planned to grab a small snack to fill its empty belly, but who could have known that it would end up encountering such a tough nut? There must have been a problem with the posture that it had woken up in. This would not do. It should return to bed and sleep for a while, and perhaps, it would find that it was just a nasty nightmare. The beasts inside the folded space had not experienced too many battles, and their intelligence was considerably lower than the beasts on the master-teacher continent. Nevertheless, that did not mean that they were so foolish as to court death. If it was unable to crush the young man's head after exerting its full strength, it was apparent that the young man was not an opponent that it could defeat. As the saying goes, of the 36 stratagems, fleeing is the way to go. Did I permit you to leave? How could Zhongxian allow the Crimson Fran's white tiger to leave as it pleased after smacking his head? Without any hesitation, he sent a kick over. Woo-woo. The Crimson Fran's white tiger skidded over 10 meters on the floor before collapsing weakly to the ground. Its head was spinning so much that even maintaining its balance was an arduous task. You've had your fun. It's time to submit to me, Zhongxian said as he sent another kick at the Crimson Fran's white tiger's face. A minute later, a droplet of blood essence drifted into Zhongxian's glabella. The Crimson Fran's white tiger had finally submitted. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. That's more like it. Zhongxian nodded contentedly. He hopped onto the back of the tiger before turning his gaze to the bulging-eyed crowd behind him. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving now. Leaving those words behind, he nudged the tiger's belly with his leg. The latter immediately began galloping ahead, disappearing into the mountain forest in the blink of an eye. It was as if it had never appeared before. He managed to tame a Crimson Fran's white tiger alone? Did he even take 3 minutes for that? My gosh. What in the world did I just see? Mu Xiao and the others gulped down several mouthfuls of saliva each. They had thought that the other party was just a bronze, but who could have known that he was a hidden challenger? They found themselves unable to keep up with the abrupt turn of events. If I had known earlier, I would have tried harder to get on good terms with him. With the backing of such a powerful expert, I would have been able to make bountiful gains here. We were blinded by the paltry gains before us. Of the 3 beasts that we have slain earlier, We distributed none of it to him at all. Considering how we've offended him, we should already be thankful that he was willing to make a move to save our lives. Hi. We have truly missed an ideal opportunity. The crowd dearly regretted their earlier actions. It was true that there were many treasures waiting to be uncovered in the Temple of Confucius, but equally great were the dangers as well. If they had an expert to cover them, they would definitely have been able to increase their gains. Unfortunately, their greed had foiled an opportunity delivered right to their doorstep, and it was unlikely that such a chance would present itself to them once more. Oblivious to the emotions of the group that he had left behind, Zhongxian was advancing swiftly on the back of the Crimson Franz white tiger. You are a beast residing in this folded space. Do you know where the Temple of Confucius is located? Zhongxian asked. The many means that he had at his disposal had failed in helping him locate the whereabouts of the Temple of Confucius. Considering how the Crimson Franz white tiger had grown up there, he should be familiar with the surroundings. It would be best to have a local guide take him around instead of wandering aimlessly around the area. Master, what is the Temple of Confucius? The Crimson Franz white tiger asked uncertainly. Zhongxian frowned upon hearing the question. Do you really not know? The Crimson Franz white tiger shook its head. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before asking, do you know of any restricted grounds in this area that you are forbidden from entering? It was likely that the Temple of Confucius would be a restricted area where the beasts were denied entry. While the Crimson Franz white tiger might be unfamiliar with the term Temple of Confucius, it should at least know of the various restricted grounds. Hearing Zhongxian's question, the Crimson Franz white tiger pondered for a moment before replying, there is one restricted ground in the area, the territory of the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger. There was one time when I accidentally stepped into his territory and ended up being nearly pummeled to death. Master, the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger is the monarch of everything within a radius of 10,000 li from here. It should be able to help you in whatever you are looking for. The Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger? Zhongxian frowned upon hearing an unfamiliar name. Having read through the books in the Sanctum of Sages, he had a decent knowledge of the many beasts in the world, and this included those that had gone extinct. However, he had never heard of a Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger before. That's right. It's a tigress. I once tried to court her, but, cough cough, I didn't succeed. The Crimson Franz white tiger said awkwardly. Back then, it had prided itself on its silky white fur and dashing appearance, so it had attempted to court the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger. Yet, shortly after it arrived in the other party's territory, before it could even meet the other party, it had been thrown out with its tail between its legs. It was extremely embarrassing even when it thought back on it now. Tigresses were indeed existences not to be trifled with. It was then that it had made up its mind to never find a tigress for its wife, or else it would not know when it would be killed in its sleep. For the time being, the female wolf next door looked rather demure and gentle. Unaware that the thoughts of the Crimson Franz white tiger had begun wandering around the place, Zhongxian asked, how strong is it? Even though the mount that he had just acquired was only at intuitive impulse realm consummation, its superior defense and astounding strength allowed it to rival even sempiternal realm intermediate stage beasts in a battle. Despite that, it had still been crushed by the so-called Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger. Just how powerful was the other party? It's at sempiternal realm consummation. It's one of the 5 monarchs of this forest. The Crimson Franz white tiger explained. 5 monarchs? UN. They are the 5 strongest existences in this forest, having reached sempiternal realm consummation. In comparison, I can only be considered to be in the lower middle tier within the forest, the Crimson Franz white tiger replied honestly, not daring to lie to its new master. Master, if you wish to seek anything, they will surely know better than me. Zhongxian nodded in response. The higher one's standing was, the more one was bound to know. Bring me to the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger, Zhongxian commanded. Yes, master. Not daring to utter another word, the Crimson Franz white tiger immediately confirmed the location before galloping ahead furiously. Ding ding ding. During their journey, Zhongxian heard the sound of metallic clangs sounding ahead. Coming a bit closer, he saw 2 groups of people coming to blows over a stalk of a medicinal herb. On the other hand, the The two groups of people swiftly halted their actions upon hearing the flurried footsteps. A moment later, they saw a young man seated atop a massive white tiger slowly approaching them. Is that an intuitive impulse realm consummation Crimson Fran's white tiger? Who in the world is that fellow? Why is he sitting on the back of the tiger? Wait a moment, could he possibly have tamed the Crimson Fran's white tiger? The two groups of people were horrified to see Zhongxian and his tiger, such that they even forgot about their conflict. On instinct alone, they opened up a pathway for Zhongxian to pass by. On the other hand, Zhongxian waved his hand at the crowd beneath with a smile. As though a superior checking on the work of his subordinates, he said earnestly, "Hello. I see that you have all been working hard. Carry on, carry on. There's no need to be affected by my presence. I am just passing by." As he said these words, he knocked the tiger's belly lightly once more with his leg. Hula! The Crimson Fran's white tiger warped into a streak of white light as it flitted through the crowd. With the lighting effect from the sun, the young man on the tiger's back appeared to be towering and powerful, almost as if a deity. That must be what a true expert is like. The crowd muttered among themselves. While they were still struggling to survive and adapt to this new environment, the other party had already tamed a powerful saint beast to explore the area. That was the despairing gap between a true expert and commoners like them. I nearly forgot. Give me that medicinal herb. No. It's mine. After recovering from their shock, they resumed their furious shouting and tussling over the medicinal herb. Chapter 1703 Encircling the Cloud Tiger. What has become of the love and compassion of humans? Seeing how the two groups had returned to tussling with one another over a medicinal herb, Zhongxian clutched his chest with a pained look on his face. Treasures are indeed the bane of mankind. This folded space is already dangerous as it is, but instead of cooperating with one another to survive this ordeal, they opted for infighting instead. I have never felt so embarrassed to be a human. Roar. The Crimson Fran's white tiger expressed its agreement. I guess there's no choice then. In order to allow the humans to halt their infighting and unite with one another to overcome this ordeal, I shall go through the trouble of taking away all of the treasures in the area so that they will have nothing else to fight over, Zhongxian said with a benevolent glow on his face. The Crimson Fran's white tiger was just about to nod in agreement as well when it suddenly realized that there was something very weird about those words. It tilted its head in bewilderment. Roar! To be able to find such a righteous excuse to plunder the treasures on this land. Its new master sure was shameless. Did he have no sense of shame? Unaware of how his image had just crumbled in the mind of the Crimson Fran's white tiger, Zhongxian instructed with an air of righteousness, "You are familiar with the local terrain, and you are able to travel around fairly quick as well. If there are any formidable treasures around the area, bring me to them." Roar. Knowing that its master had already made up his mind and it would be futile to complain, the Crimson Fran's white tiger could only nod in agreement before darting forward swiftly. It had to be said that the Crimson Fran's white tiger really did know the area well. Under its lead, Zhongxian was brought from one rare treasure to another. It would have taken him far longer if he had to scavenge them one by one manually. In less than 4 hours, he had already swept away everything good within a radius of several hundred li. There were 10,000-year-old medicinal herbs and rare ores that could not be found on the master-teacher continent. Delighted by the returns, he even recruited another 5 beasts to assist him in the treasure hunt. With no more treasures remaining in the area, the conflicts in the area had visibly reduced. Seeing that the world had taken a step toward peace, Zhongxian smiled in satisfaction. With his noble deed done, he strutted off with his 6 tamed beasts toward the territory of the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger. Fearing that the intelligence provided by the Crimson Fran's white tiger was off, he posed the same question to the 5 beasts that he had just tamed, and their responses were the same. Within this forest, the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger was the indubitable sovereign. Hide in here for the time being. When I beckon you later on, I want you to launch a decisive strike to take down the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger together. After traveling for another an hour, they were already nearing their destination. Zhongxian flicked his wrist and stowed the 6 beasts into the myriad ant hive nest. Sempiternal realm consummation beasts were far stronger than master teachers of the same tier. Even with his current fighting prowess, it was likely that he would face trouble dealing with the gold spirit cloud tiger. It was not a coincidence that he had tamed so many beasts. In truth, he was intending to use them as reinforcement. If he really could not defeat the gold spirit cloud tiger, he could set the 6 beasts on it simultaneously. Even as a sempiternal realm consummation beast, it would be tied down for a moment. He would use the time bought to launch his strongest technique and defeat it in a single move. After stowing the tamed beasts, Zhongxian crept amid the tall grasses as he swiftly flitted toward the area pointed out to him earlier. Before he could reach the lair of the gold spirit cloud tiger, he heard footsteps ahead. With a swift maneuver, he climbed onto the top of a tree and observed the situation ahead of him through the leaves. A short distance in front, a group of 8 was advancing warily. Every single one of them was holding their weapon tightly, prepared to engage their enemy at any moment. Even the weakest among them is at intuitive impulse realm consummation, and there is a sempiternal realm consummation cultivator among them too. It seems like they have also learned of the existence of the gold spirit cloud tiger and have come to subdue it. Zhongxian quickly analyzed the situation. He could not possibly be the only one who would think of seeking the strongest beast in order to ask about the location of the Temple of Confucius. It was true that the outer perimeter was suitable for cultivation, and there were many treasures lying around. However, there was no one who did not know that the true treasures lay within the Temple of Confucius. Opportunities often came with risks. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to climb to the top, and many would be willing to brave any danger for it. Who is it? While Zhongxian was still deep in thought, the sempiternal realm consummation cultivator walking at the forefront of the group suddenly turned his gaze to Zhongxian's direction. The short moment of contemplation earlier had caused a fluctuation in Zhongxian's emotions, leading to some imperfections in the concealment of his aura. It was just a slight leak, but with the entire group on guard, it was inevitable that he would be discovered. Knowing that he had been exposed, Zhongxian chuckled softly as he walked out. I was just passing by the area. The sempiternal realm consummation cultivator who had spoken earlier was an elder in his 60s. With an authoritative furrow in between his brows, he questioned, "Are you a master teacher?" Seeing that some members of the group were dressed in master teacher robes, Zhongxian replied affirmatively, "That's right. I am a grand elder of the Beast Tamer Hall, Wu Changping. I am determined to tame the beast ahead of us, so I have to ask of you not to interfere in our affairs," the elder said imposingly. "I don't intend to interfere in your affairs, but would it be fine for me to remain around the area to take a look?" Zhongxian asked. Since the other party had come before him, it would not be appropriate for him to cut right in and snatch their target. In any case, his goal was to find out the general direction of the Temple of Confucius from the gold spirit cloud tiger. With the prime amulet in his hand, he should be able to zone in on the exact location easily as long as he had a direction to work with. Hearing that the young man intended to loiter around the area, a middle-aged man amid the group harumphed. "I can't allow that. Please leave right now, or else we'll be forced to evict you." "You intend to evict me? We have already set our eyes upon the gold spirit cloud tiger. Your presence here will only hinder us," Wu Changping replied coldly. "Please seek another beast of your own." Seeing that he was not welcome there, Zhongxian shrugged nonchalantly and said, "Very well then. I wish you the best of luck." After which, he turned around and left. As soon as he was out of the group of 8's sight, he flicked his finger and sealed the space around him before making his way back. "I say, we should have just killed that fellow from earlier. Why do you all even bother to waste your breath with him? We aren't on the master-teacher continent anyway, so there's no need to abide by those troublesome rules," the middle-aged man who had bellowed at him earlier grumbled in annoyance. "I have no qualms about killing a master teacher here, but it would be bad if we alarmed the gold spirit cloud tiger in the midst of doing so. That fellow is the monarch of this forest. Having fought many battles, its instincts are particularly sharp. We have to move with the utmost caution around it and subdue it in a sweep." Wu Changping said. "You're right. I should have considered the matter more carefully." The middle-aged man nodded in agreement. After which, a frown emerged on his forehead as he asked, "We placed that item in the lair quite a while ago. That fellow should be knocked out by now, right? It should have fainted by now, but based on the intelligence we have gathered, the gold spirit cloud tiger is known to possess formidable innate resilience. We mustn't let our guard down around it. Let's wait a little longer," Wu Changping said. UN. It was apparent that Wu Changping was the leader of the group. Upon hearing his words, the crowd continued to crouch quietly amid the bushes, suppressing their auras and breathing. Roughly 10 minutes later, Wu Changping raised his hand and said, "All right, it should be about time. Let's head in and take a look." Upon hearing those words, the middle-aged man made his way over to the cavern ahead with silent footsteps. With his movements, Zhongxian could tell that he was a sempiternal realm cultivator too, albeit only at the primary stage. Nevertheless, his prowess was already enough to make him a powerhouse of the master-teacher continent. Even Sword Saint Xing only had as much strength as him. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Who? The middle-aged man entered the cavern. Hong Long. Shortly after he entered, a deafening explosion sounded. Following which, the middle-aged man flew out of the cavern with an even faster speed, and his back broke several towering trees before he finally skidded to a stop. Blood spewed wildly from his mouth. *T. It didn't fall for our trap. We can only push our way through. Wu Changping swiftly understood that their initial plan had failed. With a furious bellow, he took the lead and charged forward. Hualala. The remaining members of the group also swiftly advanced toward the cavern. Barely after they got into position, the ground suddenly tremored beneath them. A massive beast was slowly making its way out of the cavern. Chapter 1704. A Cry of Help. The massive beast emerging from the cavern was around 10 meters long and 5 meters tall. Similar to the Crimson Fran's white tiger, it was cloaked in glorious golden fur. Even before making a move, one could already smell the stench of bloodshed drifting in the air. After entering the folded space, they had encountered quite a number of beasts. Their cultivation realms were frighteningly high, but their fighting experience was sorely lacking. It still had not been easy to deal with them, but the occasional mistakes that they made created exploitable openings. However, it was completely different with the massive beast before them. From the strong killing intent that seemed to be embedded into its very presence to the extreme wariness in its eyes, it was apparent that it was a veteran in battle. Without a doubt, many powerful beasts had fallen under its claws. In order to become one of the monarchs within this forest, one had to possess indomitable strength. Sweeping its cold gaze across the group of 8, the gold spirit cloud tiger uttered wintry, "It has been so long since anyone has had the guts to wreak havoc on my territory." Astonishingly, the gold spirit cloud tiger actually spoke the language of the humans. There should not have been any humans in the Temple of Confucius for tens of thousands of years. For this reason, the gold-faced skywolf and Crimson Fran's white tiger could only communicate in the natural language of their own race. It was only after taming the latter that Zhongxian could converse with it through their telepathic connection. Yet, this massive fellow was actually able to speak in the tongue of the humans. Even Zhongxian was slightly surprised by this anomaly. "Don't waste your words on it. Get into formation," Wu Changping bellowed with a darkened face. The fact that the gold spirit cloud tiger was able to speak in the tongue of the humans likely meant that it knew a lot about the human race. The fact that their earlier ploy did not work likely meant that it was already guarded against them from the very start. Hula. The group of 8 raised their weapons and surrounded the gold spirit cloud tiger. An inexplicable link formed among their auras, almost as if there were fine threads connecting them together. With just a glance, it was apparent that on top of forming a formation, they had also utilized some kind of formidable artifact. It was no wonder they were reluctant to allow Zhongxian to watch by the side. They had already made thorough preparations to subdue and tame the gold spirit cloud tiger, so there was no way that they would risk allowing anyone to steal the fruits of their labor. How meaningless. Unconcerned by the movements of the group, the gold spirit cloud tiger released a ferocious roar. With a powerful pounce, it leaped on the middle-aged man closest to it. It seemed to be intending to barge through the formation through focusing its attack on an individual. Wang. Before its claws could land, rich energy gushed into the middle-aged man's body through the narrow threads in the surroundings, filling him with power. His body lit up with a faint glow. Augmented by the influx of energy, the middle-aged man raised his massive saber and slashed down furiously. Find authorized novels in webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. The massive congregation of saber chi manifested in the form of a towering saber afterimage in the air. Boom! The claw and the saber afterimage collided with one another, and the gold spirit cloud tiger could not help but retreat. To think that they are able to channel the strength of a group into the body of one. Zhong Xian nodded. There was no way that the middle-aged man would have been able to defend against the gold spirit cloud tiger's attacks alone. It was through the use of the narrow threads that the group infused their strength into the middle-aged man together, thus overpowering the massive beast. As a result of their collaboration, even someone as powerful as the gold spirit cloud tiger found itself unable to breach their defenses. It seems like they have used a great sage artifact. Considering how the thread was able to withstand the strength of so many people without hindering the middle-aged man's power output, there was no doubt that the artifact was at great sage tier at the very least. While it could not match up to the Dragonbone Divine Spear, it was already on par with Wu Shu's golden saber. I see. It's no wonder you dared challenge me. It seems like you have some tricks up your sleeves. The gold spirit cloud tiger harumphed coldly upon seeing that it had failed to breach their defense, but it did not show the slightest hint of being flustered. Instead, it whipped its thick tail furiously instead. It was as if its tail was a weapon. It actually harnessed might greater than that of its claws. Warping into a blur, it darted toward the middle-aged man once more. Realizing the major threat of the tail, the middle-aged man raised his saber once more to counterattack. Peng! The saber and the tail collided with one another. This time, it was the middle-aged man whose face paled, and he was forced to retreat several steps. The gold spirit cloud tiger made use of this opportunity to further its attack. It swiped its claw forward ferociously. The best way to overcome a collaborative formation when one was unable to analyze its structure and flaws was to focus one's attacks on an individual. It was apparent that the gold spirit cloud tiger was aware of this fact as well. The gold spirit cloud tiger's movements were swift and powerful. It seemed as if the middle-aged man was unable to cope and would succumb very soon. Nevertheless, Zhong Xian still shook his head. That attack won't work. If it was so convenient to overcome the might of a great sage artifact, such artifacts would not drive so many cultivators frenzied in search of them. Just as Zhong Xian thought, the next moment, Wu Changping swiftly formed a hand seal. Voila! The next moment, the string in the air was suddenly pulled taut. An incredible surge of energy was channeled from the group into the narrow string, granting it unbelievable resilience and power. Attack! Following Wu Changping's order, the other members of the group directed their weapons toward the gold spirit cloud tiger via the narrow string. Roar! The gold spirit cloud tiger clearly did not expect the string to possess such astounding prowess. It hurriedly raised its head and roared furiously. Voila! Countless surges of golden sword chi flew forth from its mouth to deflect the weapons and the string. It's able to shoot out sword chi too? The gold spirit cloud tiger is truly talented. Zhong Xian's eyes lit up in surprise. He had thought that the massive beast would have no choice but to submit to the group, but who could have known that it would actually be able to release an outpour of sword chi? Just the gold spirit cloud tiger's overwhelming strength and resilience were a pain to deal with. If it could use battle techniques on top of that, Wu Changping and the others would really face great difficulties trying to subdue it. The gold spirit cloud tiger is known for its proficiency in metal attribute offense. Do you think that we wouldn't have a countermeasure against that? Let me tell you this, that's exactly what we were waiting for. Wu Changping chuckled triumphantly as he tapped his finger. TZ la. The next moment, the color of the string changed. It assumed a color reminiscent of lava, as if flames had been infused into it. Voila! The group channeled all of their zhenqi into the string. As if oil had been scattered atop a spark, a burning inferno burst forth. In an instant, a blazing net appeared in the sky, trapping the gold spirit cloud tiger altogether. They have really prepared themselves well. It seems like the gold spirit cloud tiger is going to succumb soon, Zhong Xian remarked internally with a slight hint of awe in his voice. As expected of a grand elder from the beast tamer hall, Wu Changping's understanding of his prey, grasp of the situation, and meticulousness in his planning and execution were truly praiseworthy. Metal was known for its sharpness and resilience. The gold spirit cloud tiger was of the metal attribute, which made it extremely difficult to trap in a battle. While the string that they had brought was resilient and could be reinforced with their zhenqi, it would only be a matter of time before it snapped. This was also where the strength of the metal attribute lay. However, in anticipation of that, Wu Changping had prepared fire. Of the 5 elements, fire curbed metal. As soon as the fire burst forth, the metal attribute in the gold spirit cloud tiger's body was immediately weakened. In fact, as it had just released a metal attribute offense earlier, the backlash that it suffered was greater than usual. With this single move, the tables had turned. I really mustn't underestimate the experts of the world, Zhong Xian thought in alarm. Even though the possession of the Library of Heaven's Path granted him an edge in battle, he could not allow himself to get complacent due to it. There were still many ways that others were able to corner and subdue him. Had he been in the gold spirit cloud tiger's position, the only way that he could have resolved it was probably to bring out the otherworldly demon ancient sage's corpse. Roar. Watching as the blazing net swiftly closed in on it, the gold spirit cloud tiger also realized that the enemy had come well prepared. It knew that it was in a critically disadvantageous position. All of a sudden, it raised his head and roared once more. But this time, the roar carried no hint of aggression to it. Instead, Zhong Xian sensed pleading in it, reminiscent of a distress call. It's a call for help. Does the gold spirit cloud tiger have other companions? Wu Changping's face warped in horror. Chapter 1705 Heavenward Green Serpent. Quick! We need to subdue it right now. Knowing that they would be in a bad position once the gold spirit cloud tiger's companion came over, Wu Changping drove his zhenqi to his limits. The blazing net grew more and more searing as it contracted rapidly. As a grand elder of the Beast Tamer Hall, he had a deep understanding of beasts. The earlier call was sharp and distinctive, a clear sign that it was beckoning its companion. Just one gold spirit cloud tiger was enough a headache for them to deal with. If another one came at this moment, they would surely die. Realizing the dangerous position that they were in, anxious looks appeared on the faces of the others as well. They hurriedly drove their zhenqi into the blazing net to hasten the process. Ha ha ha. To think that you, the gold spirit cloud tiger, one of the 5 monarchs of the forest, would actually be caught by a bunch of fellows like this. How embarrassing it would be to be in a position like yours. A mocking voice echoed in the air as a slender figure darted out of the cavern. This slender figure bore some resemblance to Zhong Xian's netherworld azure dragon beast, but it was much larger, and its bloodline was significantly purer. Just like the gold spirit cloud tiger, it was a sempiternal realm consummation expert. It's a heavenward green serpent. Wu Changping's face paled. Without any hesitation, he ordered, retreat. Right after those words were said, the blazing net around the gold spirit cloud tiger dissipated into nothing. Following which, he turned around and began running into the distance. As expected of someone who had lived for many centuries, his priorities were very clear. As soon as he noticed that something was off, he was willing to abandon anything, no matter how valuable it was. Just the gold spirit cloud tiger was enough to nearly corner them. With a heavenward green serpent thrown into the mix, it formed a combo far beyond their means to deal with. Ah! Wu Changping fled the moment that he noticed that things had gone awry, but the others in the group were not as decisive as him. They were stunned for a moment before hurriedly rushing away. Just from their reactions, it was apparent that other than Wu Changping, none of them were beast tamers. With their tamed beasts fighting alongside them, true beast tamers boasted amazing fighting prowess. However, taming beasts was not an easy feat at all. The slightest mistake could very well incur the beast's backlash. For this reason, it was important for beast tamers to be able to assess the situation and know when to flee. In fact, There was an unofficial adage within the Beast Tamer Hall that went the first step to beast taming is learning when to flee. Many unexpected situations could happen during the process of beast taming. A beast tamer who did not know when to flee would have already died 100 times over before they could reach great sage. Don't you think it's inappropriate for you to leave just like that after trying to drug and kidnap one of us? A chilling voice echoed from beneath the ground. Voila! Before the other members of the group could get far, the ground suddenly rumbled furiously, as if an intense earthquake had struck the area. Following which, a massive beast rose up from the earth. It had the head of a lion, the horns of a deer, the eyes of a tiger, the body of a moose, the scales of a dragon, the tail of an ox. Find authorized novels in WebNovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. It was a chimerical Chileen. Unlike Zhongxian's Inferno Chileen, it was of the earth attribute. With a simple flick of its claw, a firm wall of yellow soil rose up from the ground and encircled the fleeing crowd, blocking their path of escape. The remaining members of the group did not expect another beast to appear. Only at that moment did they understand why Wu Changping had fled so quickly, hesitating not in the slightest to abandon them. Awful looks could be seen on their faces as they realized that they had been betrayed. Break. The current strongest member of the group, a sempiternal realm intermediate stage elder, raised his sword and hacked it down on the wall of yellow soil. Voila! The wall of yellow soil crumbled beneath the ferocious might of the sword. However, before the crowd could relish in their momentary victory, the wall of yellow soil had already regenerated at an astounding rate. In the blink of an eye, the crowd was trapped once again. If only I knew this would happen, I never would have listened to Wu Changping. Why in the world did I even risk my life for this? The crowd felt their hearts sinking into the abyss. Just like most other existing groups wandering around the folded space, their group had formed spontaneously as well. Wu Changping had gathered all of them and said that this was the only possible way that they could get to the Temple of Confucius. He had even reassured them that he had a great sage artifact and that this matter was already in the bag. After carefully contemplating over the matter, they had felt that Wu Changping's words made sense, so they had joyfully joined the group as well. Who could have known that they would end up facing 3 sempiternal realm consummation beasts simultaneously? More importantly, no one had thought that Wu Changping would actually flee faster than any one of them there. He won't be able to get away either. In contrast to the furious looks on the faces around him, Zhongxian glanced in the direction that Wu Changping had fled in and shook his head. He had to admit that the old man had made a wise decision to take flight as soon as he realized that things had gone awry, but unfortunately for him, this was not a situation that he could possibly flee from. As if fulfilling Zhongxian's prophecy, the call of an avian echoed from within the cavern. Voila! Following which, a magnificent bird cloaked in a layer of flames dashed out from the cavern. With unimaginable speed, it bolted for Wu Changping in order to apprehend him. Xiong xiong. Before the talons of the bird could reach, its flames had already surged forth to construct an inferno barrier ahead, sealing Wu Changping's path of escape. The celestial fire phoenix. Wu Changping's face paled as his body trembled non-stop. He had thought that the only beast within the cavern was the gold spirit cloud tiger, and he had prepared accordingly. Who could have known that following the emergence of the gold spirit cloud tiger, the heavenward green serpent, the terror Chileen, and the celestial fire phoenix would make an appearance too? Before they knew it, they were already faced with 4 legendary beasts. Furthermore, each of them wielded prowess that far surpassed him. How could he possibly stand a chance against something like this? Hula! Without any hesitation, Wu Changping tossed out his weapons furiously, hoping that it would buy him some time. However, that was all meaningless before the agile celestial fire phoenix. The vast difference in strength was not something that he could bridge single-handedly. Before long, he was already bound by a bundle of flames, forced to grovel on the ground. With this, the group of 8 had been fully apprehended. Despair and fear could be seen in their eyes as they shot frightened glances at the powerful beings before them. Seeing that its comrade had managed to apprehend the pesky humans who had dared lay their hands on it, the gold spirit cloud tiger glared at the guffawing heavenward green serpent and spat, "Mock me all you want after you get back. Hurry up and release the seal on me." All right, I'll help you open it. After using up a lifetime worth of laughter, the heavenward green serpent turned its head to the cavern and said, Brother Akron, I'll be counting on you for that then. Give me a moment. I'll be right out. Another voice sounded from within the cavern. The crowd turned their gazes over and saw a massive silhouette slowly making its way out of the cavern. Its movements were extremely slow. It took an entire 8 minutes from the moment that its silhouette appeared before it was able to fully make its way out of the cavern. It was a massive tortoise. The gold spirit cloud tiger, the heavenwood green serpent, the Akron black tortoise, the celestial fire phoenix, and the terror chiline. These are the 5 elements divine beasts. Wu Changping's face paled as realization struck him. I should have guessed. Legend had it that Kongsha feared that the space in the Temple of Confucius would be unstable, so he had captured 5 powerful beasts, each representing one of the 5 elements, in order to stabilize the space. They had eventually come to be known as the so-called 5 monarchs to the other beasts in the folded space. When he heard of the 5 monarchs, he had instinctively assumed that they would be scattered around the area. After all, powerful beasts were extremely territorial, and they could not tolerate other beings, especially those as powerful as them, trespassing on their land. As such, he could not have imagined that they would actually all be within the gold spirit cloud tiger's cavern. The Akron black tortoise crawled up to the gold spirit cloud tiger slowly and opened its massive mouth. Voila! Water cascaded down on the blazing net, extinguishing it in an instant. The gold spirit cloud tiger's body immediately expanded as sword chi burst forth from its acupoints. Under the barrage of sharp sword chi, the string was severed at every inch before scattering all over the floor. Despite being a great sage artifact, being set on fire before being doused in water shortly after had already ruined the structural integrity of the string. In its fragile state, the gold spirit cloud tiger's sharp sword chi was able to destroy it easily. These fellows are here to kill you. How do you intend to deal with them? The heavenwood green serpent asked. We have to deal with them, but there's still one more fellow hiding in the area. Let's capture him before deciding on what to do. The gold spirit cloud tiger lowered its head and sniffed twice before bellowing, Friend hiding over there, I applaud you for your exceptional use of spatial seals. However, it's not enough to hide from me. As it said those words, it glanced at where Zhongxian was hiding with killing intent rippling in its eyes. Chapter 1706 One-on-one with the Gold Spirit White Tiger. Have I really been discovered? Zhongxian's eyes narrowed in astonishment. Back then, his spatial seal had allowed him to enter the barracks of the otherworldly demonic tribe without being noticed. Who could have thought that his trump card would actually fail him here? Could the other party's nose really be that effective? With the doubt that the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger was trying to lure him out, Zhongxian continued camping on the spot quietly. In response to his quietness, the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger sneered coldly, Since you aren't going to come out, I'll just have to force you out myself then. With a growl, it swiped its claw and sent a surge of sword chi in Zhongxian's direction. This sword chi was infused with the keen intent of the metal attribute. It tore a vacuum through space as it bolted toward Zhongxian. While Zhongxian had sealed the space around him, he had not broken free of the dimension that he was in yet. As long as an attack was sufficiently powerful, it could still tear through his spatial seal and injure him. As soon as Zhongxian saw the trajectory sword chi, he realized that it was not a bluff from the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger. It had indeed managed to find him. With a helpless sigh, he tore free of the spatial seal and moved his feet. Who? In that instant, time seemed to have slowed down for Zhongxian. Despite that, he only managed to dodge the sword chi by a hair's breadth. Scratching his head in exasperation, he faced the 5 divine beasts before him and said, If I said that I'm only passing by and am not from the same group as them, will you believe me? He really was not from the same group as those fellows before, although he was indeed there to capture the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger as well. Of course, he would not be so dumb as to give himself away. What was standing before him were 5 sempiternal realm consummation beast. Even with his current fighting prowess, the best that he could do was flee as far from them as he could. Passing by. Don't you think it's rude of you to pass by my lair without coming in to greet me? The Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger scoffed. Voila! The gold spirit cloud tiger was still burning with fury at having almost been caught by a bunch of damned humans, so how could it possibly be in the mood to listen to Zhongxian's reasons? With a furious bellow, it sent a barrage of sword qi toward Zhongxian. The relentless barrage of sword qi formed a long current reminiscent of a majestic dragon. That's a no then. I guess I have no choice. Seeing that the gold spirit cloud tiger was unwilling to believe him, Zhongxian knew that there was nothing else that he could say to persuade it otherwise. In such a situation, he would have to allow his strength to do the talking. Taking a deep breath, he flicked his wrist, and the dragonbone divine spear materialized in his grasp. Break. Zhongxian pushed the spear forward to meet the barrage of sword qi. Huala. Putting his strength from his soul energy, zhenqi, and physical body into the dragonbone divine spear, the spear warped into a bolt of light before it collided together with the barrage of sword qi. A devastating shockwave rippled out as a result of the clash, causing cracks to appear in the space around. Countless trees were uprooted, and boulders were shattered into fragments. This single clash actually produced a hemispherical depression of over several hundred meters wide in the midst of the dense forest. What the hell? Is he really only at Aureate Body Realm? The trapped Wu Changping and the others widened their eyes in shock. They recognized the young man. He was the fellow who had been following behind them earlier before being driven away by them. They had thought that he was just a simple Aureate Body Realm cultivator, an insignificant existence to them. Never in their dreams did they imagine that he would actually be this powerful. If they had known in advance, they surely would have pulled him into their group. With him, they would have been able to capture the gold spirit cloud tiger and escape before the other four beasts even came to realize the anomaly. I thought that he was a weakling, but it turned out that he's actually the strongest of us all. Wu Changping shook his head in bitter regret. Earlier, they had discussed whether they should kill the young man or not. It was fortunate that they did not try it, or else the young man would have destroyed all of them before they could even encounter the gold spirit cloud tiger. Oh! It seems like he's not too weak, the heavenward green serpent remarked. It did not think that the Aureate Body Realm lad hiding by the side would actually harness such fighting prowess within that small frame of his. It stroked its serpentine beard with its claws as it studied the young man in interest. Humph. On the other hand, the gold spirit cloud tiger was less than pleased to have its attack countered by the young man. It was already at the peak of its anger when even a mere Aureate Body Realm lad turned out to be able to counter its attack. Its eyes widened in fury as it scrunched its body tightly together, its golden fur trembling non-stop. Die. Sylar. As if released from a bowstring, the gold spirit cloud tiger dashed forward and made use of its momentum to whip its tail toward Zhongxian. The tail moved with such swiftness that it seemed to disappear completely from sight, making it nigh impossible to discern the trajectory of the attack. How fast? Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in shock. He knew that he would not be able to withstand the attack given his current strength. Thus, he quickly activated the Zhong clan blood essence within his body. Huala. The other party's movements immediately slowed down. With a light leap, he escaped from the gold spirit cloud tiger's area of attack. Boom. A massive crater was smashed into the ground. Knowing that he would not stand a chance at this rate, Zhongxian wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead and said, "Hold it for a moment. Are you going to beg for mercy now? It's already too late." Seeing how the young man had managed to evade its strongest attack with ease and even had the leisure to chat, even though the gold spirit cloud tiger was furious, it knew that it was unlikely to be able to subdue the young man in the short run. Thus, it halted its attack, wanting to hear what the young man had to say. In any case, the 5 divine beasts were gathered there. The earth and the sky were completely sealed. There was no way that the young man could possibly escape. I know there's no chance that I'll be able to escape from here anymore, so at the very least, I would like to have a fair duel with you. Will you at least accede to this request of mine? Zhongxian clasped his fist. Fair duel? The 5 divine beasts glanced at one another, not knowing what in the world he was saying. Indeed. I am only at the Aureate Body Realm at the moment, so I know that I won't stand much of a chance against you all. Nevertheless, I would still like to fight for a chance for survival. I want to challenge the gold spirit cloud tiger to a one-on-one duel. If I lose, the only thing that awaits me is death. However, if I win by any chance, I beseech you to let me go. Zhong Xian said. Ha! The 5 divine beasts immediately understood Zhong Xian's intentions. The young man was afraid that they would attack him together. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience. Please click for visiting. Human, you should stop trying to judge us by your standard. You are belittling us far too much. Even if we are of the same cultivation realm, we aren't going to stoop so low as to gang up on you. The heavenward green serpent remarked impassively. As ones who had inherited the bloodlines of ancient divine beasts, as well as monarchs who ruled over countless subjects, they had their own pride to uphold. Putting aside ganging up on someone weaker than them, they would not do so even for someone in the same cultivation realm as them. You can rest assured that I won't allow them to interfere in our battle. The gold spirit cloud tiger spat. It was just a moment ago that it had nearly been captured by a group of humans, and now, another human actually wanted to challenge it to a one-on-one duel. Given how it had already embarrassed itself earlier, if it was still unable to deal with someone 2 realms weaker than it, what right would it have to rule over the other beasts in the forest? That's a relief. To be honest, Zhong Xian had given the matter a try, not expecting the 5 divine beasts to accede to his request. In fact, he had already been planning his escape route, but it seemed like there was no need for it anymore. Heaving a deep sigh of relief, he raised his head and said, "One more thing. As a cultivator, it's not against the rule for me to use my artifacts in battle, right? Feel free to use whatever artifacts you have." The gold spirit cloud tiger harumphed coldly, thinking nothing of Zhong Xian's request. It would already be the blessing of the heavens that an aureate body realm lad like him had such a formidable spear. While the spear was indeed remarkable, the gold spirit cloud tiger was confident that it could deal with it. Also, I happen to be a beast tamer. It won't be against the rules if my tamed beasts assist me, right? Zhong Xian asked. Tamed beasts? Humph. If you have anything decent, just bring them all out, the gold spirit cloud tiger remarked arrogantly. I'm reassured then. Nodding in satisfaction, Zhong Xian flicked up his dragonbone divine spear. Let's begin. Humph. The gold spirit cloud tiger let loose a furious roar before charging forward with narrowed eyes. However, barely a second after it started moving, it suddenly felt a sharp pain assaulting its soul, as if someone was pricking it with countless needles. Following which, a suffocating pressure crushed down on it. Soul offense. *T. Not expecting the young man to have such a card up his sleeves, the gold spirit cloud tiger's massive body stiffened on the spot. The beast tribe were known for their superior physical body, which granted them defensive and offensive capabilities far superior to human cultivators. However, they had a fatal weakness, and that was their soul. The other party had executed a soul offense right from the start, and it was stronger than what it had ever faced before. Caught completely off guard, it ended up succumbing to the move. Chapter 1707. The Cloud Tiger submits. Soul offense? The heavenward green serpent was taken aback. It did not expect the aureate body realm cultivator to have such a technique at his disposal, so what if it's a soul offense? Cloud Tiger has been training her soul energy in order to prevent her killing intent from clouding her mind, the calm Acron Black Tortoise said. She has just been caught off guard at the moment. Once she recovers, she will be able to destroy that fellow with a single move. Besides, soul offense is a double-edged sword. At the very most, he will only be able to launch a single effective attack on the soul of a sempiternal realm cultivator. There's no way he will be able to do it a second time. It was not just its movements that were slow, even the pacing of its speech was slow as well. The heavenward green serpent nodded in agreement to the Acron Black Tortoise's judgment. The 5 of them had inherited the bloodlines of the ancient divine beasts. While their souls might have been their weakness, it was not a weakness that anyone could exploit. Besides, soul offense was a double-edged sword. As powerful as soul attacks were, it would cause considerable backlash to the practitioner as well. Even if the young man was a skilled soul cultivator, how many times could he launch an attack as powerful as that? Shortly after the Acron Black Tortoise said those words, The gold spirit cloud tiger also recovered from its disorientated state. With a howl of fury, it charged toward the young man before it. This time, it was truly enraged. To think that a monarch like it would end up falling for the sole offense of a mere aureate body realm cultivator. It was fortunate that the other party had not used the opportunity to assault it, or else it would have been in deep trouble. If it really lost to the other party, it would not be able to face its subordinates anymore. What? At the very most, I'll just die together with you. Seeing how swiftly the gold spirit cloud tiger had recovered, Zhongxian's eyes paled in horror. In a slight fluster and with desperation in his movements, he pushed his spear furiously to counter the other party's offense. You are still thinking of retaliating, are you? Dream on. The gold spirit tiger spat coldly. It was already bad enough for it to have succumbed to the young man's sole offense once. Was the young man really so naive as to think that his sole offense would work on it once its guard was up? It gathered all of its concentration on reinforcing its mind in an attempt to defend against the young man's sole offense, but the next moment, it heard a whoosh sound above its head. It seemed as if something heavy was swiftly approaching it. Cr*P, I fell for his trap. Feeling a crushing pressure overhead, the gold spirit cloud tiger immediately realized that it was a feint. The killing move was actually hidden above it. Raising its head, it was just about to see what was falling on it when it suddenly felt a powerful will intruding into its mind, causing a bout of lightheadedness. That fellow's pale face is a trick as well. The gold spirit cloud tiger widened its eyes in realization as its mind swiftly blanked out. If the young man was truly as weakened as he looked, how could he possibly be able to execute such a powerful soul offense? It was apparent that the young man was feigning weakness in order to make it lower its guard. Peng. Find authorized novels in webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Barely after it made sense of the situation, an immense force had already smashed right into its head, causing its body to sway weakly from side to side. While it was unsure what kind of artifact it was, the fact that it was able to inflict such tremendous damage on it meant that it was a great sage artifact at the minimum. This is a great sage brick, the heavenward green serpent murmured with a hint of disbelief in its voice. It could hardly believe what it was seeing. It seems to have been infused with several tons of golden origin spirit stone, the Acron black tortoise added with twitching lips. Golden origin spirit stone is so rare that not much of it can be found in the world. Yet, it was actually used it to forge a mere brick. It was so extravagant that they could hardly wrap their minds around the concept. That was the invaluable golden origin spirit stone that they were talking about. Just adding a sprinkle of it into the forging process would turn a saint pinnacle artifact into a great sage artifact. Yet, to use several tons of such a valuable ore to forge a dumb old brick. Bro, can you tell me which wastrel forged you? I'll pummel some sense into that idiot. While the two divine beasts were still overwhelmed by how wasteful human cultivators were, they heard the brick exclaiming excitedly, "Ha ha ha! Hurry up and surrender, stupid tiger, otherwise, I, the golden origin cauldron, shall burn you into cinders." The golden origin cauldron? Could it be that this brick is supposed to be a cauldron? The heavenward green serpent gritted its teeth so tightly together that its gums were starting to feel a bit numb. Can anyone tell me how in the world this lump of metal resembles a cauldron? How in the world did you find the courage to call yourself a cauldron? Don't you know what you look like? What golden origin cauldron and burn you into cinders? Even if the gold spirit cloud tiger allows you to do whatever you please with it, you have no furnace to burn it down at all. Not only were the divine beasts rendered frenzied by the sight before them, even the trapped Wu Changping and the others were utterly bewildered by the situation. It sure was hard to understand the world of aristocrats. While he was risking his life for a single divine beast, the other party was forging the incredibly invaluable golden origin spirit stone into a useless lump of metal. Disregarding the mental breakdowns occurring around him, Zhongxian bellowed deeply once more, "Go, Huala!" The infernal black saber, Wu Shu's golden saber, Beixin's spear, and the dragonbone divine spear all flew forth. Just like that, the gold spirit cloud tiger suddenly found itself coming under the simultaneous assault of 5 powerful artifacts. As if that was not enough, from time to time, an inkstone would suddenly charge forward and smash itself onto its face. The hell? Can this still be called a one-on-one? The heavenward green serpent, Terra Chelene, and the others felt their vision blacking out. Earlier, that fellow declared righteously that he wanted to have a fair fight with the gold spirit cloud tiger in the hope of winning a chance at survival. They had anticipated a solemn duel between the two, but contrary to their expectations, the young man had actually dispatched so many artifacts to fight the gold spirit cloud tiger instead. While other cultivators were praying fervently to acquire just a single great sage artifact, this fellow actually had 6 of them in his possession. Are you actually the illegitimate son of the head of the Blacksmith Guild headquarters? No. Not even the illegitimate son of the Blacksmith Guild headquarters would have so many great sage artifacts with him. With those great sage artifacts moving alongside him, it was as if the gold spirit cloud tiger was facing the assault of 6 sempiternal realm experts simultaneously. Hand on heart, can you really consider this a one-on-one? Seeing how its good friend was nearly being pummeled into a domestic cat, the celestial fire phoenix could hardly bring itself to watch on. Should we interfere? But that fellow has asked whether he's able to use his artifacts earlier, and we gave him our consent. The heavenward green serpent replied awkwardly. When the fellow asked him the question earlier, they had thought that the other party was just courteously asking for permission to use that spear of his. But it seemed like they were still lacking in worldly experience. The heck was that courtesy? That was a trap, and an utterly shameless one at that. Which sempiternal realm cultivator could possibly withstand the assault of so many artifacts at once? Wait a minute. What is that fellow doing over there? While the divine beasts were still raging over Zhong Xian's shamelessness, they saw the young man raising his hand once more. Hula! All of a sudden, 6 beasts appeared around the gold spirit cloud tiger. Their cultivation ranged from intuitive impulse realm consummation to sempiternal realm. As soon as they appeared, they pounced right toward the gold spirit cloud tiger. The remaining 4 divine beasts glanced at one another, stupefied. Those are his tamed beasts. They seem to be from this region, right? It seems so. So, in the short period of time that the folded space appeared, he managed to tame 6 beasts. The heavenward green serpent trembled in rage. When did our beasts become so prideless and cowardly? The fact that they were able to speak human tongue meant that they knew a fair bit about human culture. It was not surprising for them to know of the beast tamer occupation as well. It had only been a couple of hours since the humans had entered the forest, and yet, the other party had already tamed 6 beasts. Was this not a little too fast? We have to make sure to settle this matter later on. We must make it clear to our subordinates that we, the beast tribe, mustn't lower our heads to others, the heavenward green serpent uttered passionately. This is especially so for the subordinates of Cloudtiger's region. Given how prideful she is, how can her subordinates be so weak-minded? The gold spirit cloud tiger was a noble beast who would go to any lengths to protect its pride and reputation. Why were its subordinates so cowardly? But before the heavenward green serpent could finish its words, the gold spirit cloud tiger, who had still been battling furiously a moment ago, suddenly lowered itself on the ground. A droplet of blood essence seeped out from its glabella and floated over to the young man. The massive tiger placed its head on the ground subserviently. Gold spirit cloud tiger pays respects to master. Chapter 1708. One word is all it takes, the heck. This sight made the eyes of the heavenward green serpent nearly fall to the ground. The other 3 divine beasts also exchanged horrified looks with one another. They were the ones who had inherited the bloodlines of ancient divine beasts. They were dignified, powerful, lofty, regal. But in such a short period of time, the gold spirit cloud tiger had actually chosen to submit to a mere human. There was something really wrong about this. She has really sullied our reputation. The heavenward green serpent was seething with rage. It was the head of the 5 monarchs of the forest. It had thought that it was already shameful for the subordinates of the gold spirit cloud tiger to actually have allowed a mere human to tame them, but barely a moment after it thought so, those beasts' leader submitted. Was this not as good as a crisp slap to its face? It was true that the gold spirit cloud tiger was under a lot of pressure. having to deal with 6 great sage artifacts and 5 beasts simultaneously. In fact, it had already been thinking of reinforcing the gold spirit cloud tiger, but it did not expect the latter to surrender so quickly. Where did all of its self-esteem go to? Rise. Swallow this pill. Zhongxian flicked his finger and fed the gold spirit cloud tiger a grade 9 pill before heaving a sigh of relief. In truth, the reason he had proposed to fight a one-on-one with the gold spirit cloud tiger was to make use of the opportunity to tame it. And just as he had planned, through a mixture of scare tactics and a bit of guidance through telepathy, he had managed to convince the gold spirit cloud tiger to submit to him. With the gold spirit cloud tiger on his side, even if the remaining 4 divine beasts turned on him, he would at least have the power to protect himself. With this, it should be considered my victory, right? With a flick of his wrist, Zhongxian collected his tamed beasts and his artifacts back into his storage ring before turning to look at the heavenward green serpent. Lad, what kind of sorcery did you use to make the gold spirit cloud tiger bow down to you and acknowledge you as her master? With an awful look, the heavenward green serpent questioned Zhongxian with killing intent flaring from its eyes. Do you want to hear the truth? Zhongxian asked. Of course. The heavenward green serpent replied with gritted teeth. The truth is that I am your master from your previous life. In the midst of her fight with me, the gold spirit cloud tiger realized my true identity. That's why she submitted to me without any hesitation, Zhongxian said as he gazed into the blank space with a deep look in his eyes, reminiscent of a true expert. You are our master from our previous life. T. The heavenward green serpent nearly fainted from the rubbish that the young man was spouting. Can you come up with a better excuse than that? What master in our previous life? Why don't you say that you are the reincarnation of Kongsha? The heck, I can also say that I was your grandfather in my previous life. You don't believe me? Zhongxian frowned in discontentment. Believe your head. The heavenward green serpent retorted angrily. Even if you want to fool us, do you think that we'll accept such an excuse? Turning his sights away from the raging heavenward green serpent, Zhongxian looked at the other 3 divine beasts and asked, What about you? Do you not believe me either? It's no use stalling for time. We won't let you do as you please anymore, the Acron black tortoise replied slowly. The celestial fire phoenix harumphed. Let's not waste our words on him. There's something really weird about this fellow. Let's just kill him first before discussing anything else. Let's do it then. I'll make the first move. The Terra Cheline said as it took a step forward. In truth, they also felt a little pressured by the peculiarities that the young man had displayed so far. Putting everything aside, there was something really amiss about how he was able to tame the gold spirit cloud tiger so swiftly. As monarchs of the forest, they were extremely prideful creatures. Who would be willing to give up a position of superiority just to become subservient to a man? It seems like none of you believe me. Zhongxian shook his head in disappointment before looking at the 4 divine beasts before him straight in the eye. Do you dare to make a wager with me? A wager? That's right. I'll wager that I just have to say a single word to express my identity in order to make the heavenward green serpent bow down to me and acknowledge me as its master. Zhongxian said calmly as he placed his hands behind his back leisurely. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience please click for visiting. You think that I'll submit to you with just a single word? The heavenward green serpent nearly choked on its flurrying anger. Are you certain that there isn't anything wrong with your head? As a beast who had inherited the noble bloodline of the dragons, it was a powerful and highly esteemed existence in the beast tribe. Even if it was grilled alive, there was no way that it would submit to a mere human. Putting aside a single word, it was futile even if the other party used up his entire lifetime worth of words. Just give the word and say if you are willing to accept my wager. Zhongxian shrugged nonchalantly. The wager is simple. If I am able to make you submit, you must acknowledge my identity and make the other 3 divine beasts submit to me. If I am unable to do it, I'll free the gold spirit cloud tiger and kill myself on the spot. You want me to make them submit to you too? The heavenward green serpent was slightly startled. It did not expect the young man to propose such a wager. Indeed. As the head of the 5 monarchs, Surely you have some confidence in yourself, right? Zhongxian said with a taunting smile. Humph. If our boss is willing to submit to you, we have no qualms about submitting to you. However, can we really trust you to fulfill your end of the bargain if you lose the wager? The terror Chelin challenged. Having known the heavenward green serpent for so many years, they were already familiar with the latter's temper. It was incredibly obstinate and unbending, especially when it came to matters that compromised its dignity. The only one who had made the heavenward green serpent submit in so many years was Kongsha. Yet, the young man wanted to make it submit to him. What a joke. That's right. If you can make our boss submit to you, we'll acknowledge you as our master. What's there to be frightened of? There's no way our boss will bow to a weak human like you. The Celestial Fire Phoenix and the Acron Black Tortoise also voiced their support proudly. I'll hold you to your promise then, Zhongxian replied calmly. I just hope that you won't renege on your promise when the time comes, the terror Chelin spat coldly. But at this point in time, a frown furrowed its way onto the heavenward green serpent's forehead. The situation was developing so quickly in a direction that it did not expect that it felt like there was a need for it to stop and think things through. The fearlessness of the young man and his ability to make the gold spirit cloud tiger submit to him so quickly left it feeling a little unnerved. At this lull in the conversation, the terror Chelin sent a telepathic message to the heavenward green serpent. Boss, you have always disliked the scheming humans. We believe in you. Why don't you accept this fellow's request and save Cloud Tiger first? Considering the heavenward green serpent's temperament, this was a wager that they were bound to win. There was nothing for them to fear. Uncertainty flickered across the heavenward green serpent's eyes for a moment before it finally gathered its resolve and nodded. Very well, I'll accept your wager. It would not dare make guarantees for other beasts, but it was at least confident in itself. Even if it died, it would never bow down to another human in its life. Let's begin then. Seeing that he had managed to convince the heavenward green serpent to accept his wager, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. Are you ready? I don't wish to leak the matter to others, so I'll be sending you a telepathic message instead. Please listen to me very closely. Feel free to do whatever you want. No matter what you do, there's no way I'll submit to you. I advise you to give up on this meaningless pursuit, the heavenward green serpent sneered coldly. Some things were simply impossible. No matter what the other party said, there was nothing that would be able to change its mind. Even if you are Kongsha's reincarnation, as long as I refuse to acknowledge you, what can you do about it? Having made up its mind, it pricked up its ears to listen closely to what the young man was going to say. Just as it was making preparations, the Celestial Fire Phoenix, Terra Chelin, and Acron Black Tortoise were discussing the situation telepathically. Rest assured, I know our boss very well. No one can make his determination waver. I think that fellow is intentionally stalling for time. There's a chance that he might have some reinforcements on the way. We have to keep a close eye on the surroundings. While they were discussing the matter fervently, they suddenly saw the young man taking in a deep breath before shouting a single consonant telepathically. Pada. Instantly, the heavenward green serpent collapsed to the ground, its body trembling non-stop. It glanced frightfully at the young man before lowering its body all the way down. With agitation in its voice, it exclaimed, "Heavenward green serpent pays respects to master." Chapter 1709 Guarding the Exi, our boss, has acknowledged him as its master. Utter silence loomed in the area. The Celestial Fire Phoenix, Terra Chelin, and Acron Black Tortoise were all stunned silly. They remained rooted to the spot, and their minds seemed to have stalled. They knew just how obstinate the heavenward green serpent could be. But with just a single consonant from the other party, it actually sprawled right to the ground with no regards for its dignity at all. To make matters worse, there was a look of desire in its eyes. What in the name of heavens had just happened? At the same time, Wu Changping was on the verge of insanity as well. In order to tame the gold spirit cloud tiger, he had made many preparations. He had promised many treasures to convince the other 7 members of the group to assist him in his mission. On top of that, he had even expended a great sage artifact for this purpose, But in the end, he had failed to acquire anything and even been captured. On the other hand, this fellow had managed to tame the gold spirit cloud tiger within a few short minutes. With another word, he made the heavenward green serpent grovel on the ground, not daring to appear disrespectful at all. This was ridiculous. Seal the contract, Zhong Xian instructed. Toward beasts who possessed the dragon bloodline, there was no weapon stronger than the 8 notes of heavenly dragon. No matter how high-tiered the heavenward green serpent was, it was unable to break free from the restraints of its bloodline. It was precisely due to his awareness of this that Zhong Xian intentionally made a wager with it. As expected, the others had swiftly been baited by his promise. It was not that they were fools, but it was simply unthinkable for a mere human to be able to speak the language of the pure-blooded dragon. No one would expect an aureate body realm cultivator like him to have so many tricks up his sleeve, such that even sempiternal realm experts like them would end up being caught off guard time and time again. Even though the heavenward green serpent was a little reluctant to relinquish its freedom, under the pressure of the 8 notes of heavenly dragon, it had no choice but to offer its blood essence. After sealing the contract, Zhong Xian turned to the 3 remaining beasts and said, "It's your turn. Since I was able to make the heavenward green serpent submit with a single word, it's my victory. Of course, it's just an ordinary wager. No vows were made, and there's nothing to bind you to your words. If you don't intend to follow the wager." Ridiculous. The blood of the ancient divine beasts runs through our veins. How can we possibly renege on our promise? A loss is a loss. Since our boss has chosen to submit to you, I have no problem acknowledging you as my master. I just hope that you won't force us into doing anything that violates our principles. The Terra Cheline, Celestial Fire Phoenix, and Acheron Black Tortoise were not too happy about the situation, but they were too proud to renege on their promise. They nodded and offered their blood essence to Zhong Xian. In any case, since the other party had been able to make their boss submit, it was not too embarrassing for them to acknowledge the other party as their master. It was at least something that they could live with. That saves me a lot of trouble. Seeing that the other 3 beasts had decided to abide by their promise, Zhong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. The main reason Zhong Xian had made the wager was to make those 3 divine beasts submit to him as well. Of course, with the heavenward green serpent and gold spirit cloud tiger on his side, he would have been able to eventually beat them into submission. Nevertheless, this would spare him a great deal of trouble. Since you have chosen to submit to me, as your master, I should at least reciprocate your loyalty. After taming all 5 divine beasts, Zhong Xian looked at every one of them before speaking again. Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger, as a metal attribute beast, you possess superior offensive capability, but your defense is considerably lacking. More importantly, despite the immense strength you wield, you lack precision in control. That left you with a lot of openings that I could exploit. I'll point out a couple of your major flaws now, and as long as you make corrections accordingly, you should be able to raise your fighting prowess significantly. He went on to elaborate on several flaws that the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger suffered from, as well the ways to correct them. When he fought with the latter earlier, the Library of Heaven's Path had already uncovered the flaws that it was suffering from. Combining that with his knowledge as a beast tamer, it was extremely easy for him to find the solutions to those flaws. Cultivating in accordance to Zhong Xian's impartation, the Gold Spirit Cloud Tiger did enjoy a significant rise in its fighting prowess. A brilliant gleam surfaced in its eyes as it kneeled onto the floor once more, this time out of earnest respect for Zhong Xian. If it had only submitted due to the threats and benefits that Zhong Xian had promised, this time around, it was out of earnest respect for him. Following which, he offered some pointers to the cultivation of the remaining divine beasts as well, inducing a significant leap in their fighting prowess. Excited over their newfound strength, they hurriedly bowed in gratitude to Zhong Xian. Having reached sempiternal realm consummation, they had thought that it would be difficult for them to advance their fighting prowess unless there was a major evolution in their bloodline. They had never thought that there was still room for them to improve further. If they continued cultivating in accordance to Zhong Xian's words, they might even be able to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage in the future. To them, this was much more attractive than being the monarchs of this forest and ruling over a bunch of beasts. "Master, what do we do about these fellows?" The heavenward green serpent pointed to Wu Changping and the others. Their actions lacked consideration, and they were disrespectful to the gold spirit cloud tiger. Nevertheless, their actions don't warrant the death sentence. Make them compensate for their actions and set them free, Zhong Xian said with a wave of his hand. To be honest, he was kind of glad that the group of 8 was in front of him. If he had charged right into the lair, he would have been the one who was encircled by the 5 divine beasts. Perhaps, he might not have even gotten a chance to fight one-on-one, and things might not have ended as smoothly as they did. However, it was a fact that the group of 8 bore malicious intentions toward him, and they had made a move on the gold spirit cloud tiger. Considering how the latter was now his tamed beast, he could not let the group of 8 go without making them pay a hefty price. Yes, master. Seeing that his master was not the type of honest-to-a-fault human, the divine beasts heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like they would not be taken advantage of by others serving him. Under the menace of the 5 divine beasts, Wu Changping and the others had no choice but to submit. They obediently handed over the treasures that they had amassed over this period of time along with grade 9 pills, artifacts, and the like before they were finally set free. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience. Please click for visiting. Take them. I'll leave it to you to decide how you want to split these items among yourselves. Also, I want to make it clear that your loyalty will not go unrewarded. If you perform well, I have no qualms granting you my great sage artifact. Zhong Xian said. The artifacts that Wu Changping and the others had handed over could not even catch his eye, so he left it to the 5 divine beasts to deal with them internally. At the same time, he also dropped them expectations for the future. Managing one's tamed beast was actually not much different from managing one's subordinates. On top of the carrot and the stick, what was more important was to give them positive expectations for the foreseeable future, resolving the flaws in their cultivation and promises of invaluable treasures. With the offer of such alluring benefits, the 5 divine beasts would be more inclined to submit to him both physically and mentally. As expected, after hearing his words, looks of agitation appeared on the 5 divine beasts. From the looks of it, it seemed like Zhong Xian had won their loyalty for the time being. After Wu Changping and the others left, Zhong Xian finally posed the doubt lingering in his heart. Shouldn't you all be scattered around the area? Why are you gathered inside the gold spirit cloud tiger's lair? Based on what he had heard from the Crimson Franz white tiger, the 5 monarchs each had their own territory in the forest and rarely interacted with one another. Why would they gather together in a lair? As soon as we noticed that the dimension has been opened and humans have made their way in, we immediately gathered together here. Firstly, we intended to come up with a countermeasure to curb the threat of the humans. Secondly, we also wanted to guard the exit and prevent anyone from passing through it, the heavenward green serpent explained. Exit. Zhong Xian's eyes lit up upon hearing that word. Could it be that the exit to the Temple of Confucius lies within the cavern? Given that the 5 divine beasts had come out of the cavern, could it be that the supposed exit was located in there? That's right. The heavenward green serpent nodded. Back then, Kongsha brought us here and delegated the responsibility of guarding the exit and preventing anyone from finding it to us. Chapter 17:10 Desert Dimension. Of course, we've seen him before. It hasn't been too long since Kongsha left this dimension after all. The heavenward green serpent nodded affirmatively as if it was the most natural thing in the world. It hasn't been long since Kongsha left this dimension. A deduction surfaced in Zhong Xian's mind, and he hurriedly asked, how long has it been since Kongsha left this dimension? The heavenward green serpent pondered for a moment before replying, roughly 400 years, I suppose. Indeed. Zhong Xian's body shuddered at having his hypothesis verified. He had thought that it was odd when the heavenward green serpent said that Kongsha had brought them here, but he did not think that they were lying to him. There was no reason for them to lie to him. Instead, he thought that this anomaly could be attributed to a difference in the flow of time instead. Most likely, the flow of time within the folded space was slower than the flow of time on the master-teacher continent, or else the divine beasts would have already been reduced to a pile of bones by now. The words that the heavenward green serpent had just said effectively verified his deduction. Doing a rough calculation, it had been around 40,000 years since Kongsha left the master-teacher continent. Yet, in the eyes of the heavenward green serpent, it had only been 400 years since he had left. Did this not mean that the flow of time within the folded space was 1/100th of the world outside? In other words, the passing of a day in this folded space equated to the passing of 100 days in the master-teacher continent. If such time deceleration could be used on an ancient sage, the latter would be able to extend their lifespan significantly without resorting to hibernation. No, this doesn't work either. With my mastery of temporal arts, I should be able to notice it if there's any difference in the flow of time. Yet, why do I not sense anything at all? Zhong Xian wondered with a frown. Having comprehended the time quintessence, he was no longer as ignorant of time as he had been before. If there was a difference in the flow of time, he surely would have noticed it. Yet, that was not the case. Why was it so? Forget it, there's no point thinking about it now. I'll probably find my answer once I get to the Temple of Confucius. Unable to figure out the reason after some thought, Zhong Xian shook his head and tossed the matter to the back of his mind. He turned to the 5 divine beasts and said, "Bring me to the exit." The heavenward green serpent led the way forward. The cavern was spacious, and there was a huge hole in the middle where a pool of lava flurried. It felt like anything in the world would melt within the pool of lava. This is the exit. Zhong Xian was taken aback. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. No matter how he looked at it, all he could see was the crater of a volcano. It was hard to imagine that the Temple of Confucius was located within the crater. I'm not too sure about the details either. Back then, Kongsha instructed the 5 of us to guard this area, so we guessed that it's the passageway leading to the Temple of Confucius. The heavenward green serpent explained. Kongsha's wisdom was expansive and transcendental. It was not something that beasts like them could fathom. Perplexed, Zhong Xian activated the Eye of Insight and scanned his surroundings, but he was unable to find any indicative signs at all. In the end, he could only shake his head. For the time being, you should enter my folded space. Whether the passageway lies within the crater or not, I'll just have to check to find out. Knowing that he would not find anything dawdling in the area, Zhong Xian stowed the beasts into the myriad anthive nest with a wave of his hand. After that, he leaped right into the pool of lava. Given how even the Empyrean heavenly flame was unable to burn his physical body, there was no way that he would fear mere lava. As searing as it was, such heat could not bother him anymore. He continued to swim downward for a while longer. Soon, a spatial seal reminiscent of that in the subterranean gallery appeared before him. Without any hesitation, he dived through the spatial seal. Hula! The world warped around Zhong Xian, placing him in a short state of disorientation. By the time that he recovered from his lightheadedness, he was already standing in a completely different world. The area that the 5 divine beasts lorded over was a forest with lush greenery, but the land that he was currently standing on was a desert. Intolerable heat waves swept across the surface of the sand, and the entire world seemed to be covered with an endless shade of beige. There was no end in sight. "Is this the exit you spoke of?" Zhong Xian sighed helplessly. From the looks of it, it felt like he had leaped from one folded space to another. However, this folded space did not seem to have anything to do with the Temple of Confucius at all. Could he have gone the wrong way? The heavenward green serpent was also baffled by the change in scenery. They did not think that such a world would exist behind the seal that they had guarded for 400 years. It was clear that they had never been there before. The heavenward green serpent pondered for a moment before suggesting an idea. "Master, I have scouted the entire forest, and this is the only way out of it. Could this be another trial set up by Kongsha? Perhaps, you have to continue searching for the next exit in order to get to the Temple of Confucius. I guess that's the only possibility." Zhong Xian shook his head helplessly. He could not think of another rational explanation other than this. Perhaps, it might be more accurate to think of the entire folded space as a layered dungeon. Only by finding the exit would he be able to proceed to the next floor. He would have to overcome several flaws before he would finally arrive at the Temple of Confucius. Of course, he had known from the very start that it would be no simple feat to get to the Temple of Confucius. He swiftly decided on another direction with a twist of the dragonbone divine spear, and riding on the back of the heavenward green serpent, he charged ahead. There was not a single person to be found within the arid desert. In less than 2 hours of flight, both Zhongxian and the heavenward green serpent were already feeling a little lightheaded. Their lips were starting to crack from dryness. Something is amiss here, Zhongxian thought with a tight knit between his brows. Given their cultivation, putting aside a desert, their bodies would not have any abnormalities even if they were to sleep on top of lava. It was unthinkable for them to become dehydrated after a short 2-hour journey. Zhongxian studied the folded space closely and swiftly noticed that it was constructed in a manner very different from other spaces. It was ingeniously designed to form a formation that would continuously sap one's water and stamina. He turned to the heavenward green serpent and said, "It seems like this is really no ordinary desert. We have to quickly find the exit, or else we might lose our lives here." As he spoke, he took out the spirit essence that he had kept in his storage ring and drank it. It quenched his thirst and rejuvenated the sapped vitality in his body. He passed it over to the heavenward green serpent to have a drink as well before proceeding ahead. After another hour of journeying, he suddenly noticed some footprints on the ground. It's the footprints of a human. Could it be that another human has entered this folded space through the exit? Zhongxian frowned doubtfully. He had needed to deal with the 5 monarchs before he was able to find his way here. Furthermore, the location of the exit was extremely discreet, hidden in the midst of the lava. Typically speaking, it should have taken quite a bit of time for others to find this location. It was bizarre to find fresh footprints in the midst of the desert. Could it be that someone had entered the area ahead of him? Let's head over to take a look. Intrigued, he activated his eye of insight and followed the trail of footprints. Soon, he discovered a group of men ahead of him. There were powerful emanations of zhengqi all around, which seemed to suggest that they were battling with some other entity. Taking a closer look, there were 18 men in total. They were all dressed in different clothes, and the strongest of them was at the intuitive impulse realm. Their faces were ghastly pale, and their lips were cracked. They looked like they were in a much more terrible state than he was. The entity that they were battling against was a giant made out of sand. It had no distinctive features, but the powerful aura that it released showed that it wielded strength comparable to a sempiternal realm primary stage cultivator. It was precisely due to this that, despite their numerical advantage, the group of 18 was still facing trouble taking it down. Break. Knowing that he could acquire important intelligence from the group ahead of him, he whipped out his dragonbone divine spear and tossed it toward the sand giant. Voila! As if a javelin, the dragonbone divine spear pierced right through the sand giant, and its aura immediately dissipated. Voila! It crumbled into a pile of yellow sand on the ground. "Thank you for saving our lives." Seeing that Zhongxian had defeated the sand giant that they had been struggling with, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief before bowing respectfully to Zhongxian. Seeing their haggard faces before him, it was apparent that they had been in there for at least several hours. Perplexed, he asked, "How did you all get here?" "We passed out after the brilliant light emanated from the Temple of Confucius enveloped us, and when we woke up once more, we were already here." "Elder, why did you ask us that question?" an intuitive impulse realm cultivator in the group replied. He seemed to be a little surprised by Zhongxian's bizarre question. Chapter 17:11 Sand Giants, you were already here when you woke up? Zhongxian was taken aback. He had woken up in the forest ruled by the 5 monarchs, but these people actually woke up here. Could it be that the crowd was not just teleported to a random location, they were teleported to random folded spaces as well? It's no wonder I couldn't feel Luo Ruoxin or any familiar auras around. He had encountered quite a few cultivators in the forest earlier, but he did not find any familiar faces. He had not thought much of it back then, but at this moment, it was already more than apparent that something was wrong. It seemed like the Temple of Confucius was far more complex than he had predicted. What was the sand giant earlier? Since you have been here for several hours already, did you notice anything striking? Zhongxian continued asking. The forest was filled with treasures and the teacher's milieu, which could raise a cultivator's soul depth. On the other hand, this desert seemed to be challenging a cultivator's limits. Parched and sweltering, they were completely two different worlds. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates, better experience please click for visiting. But since everyone was teleported to a different folded space, there should be some kind of exit that would take him to another folded space. The sand giant is a life form that exists in this desert. We encountered it after traveling for roughly 4 hours, and it attacked us upon noticing our presence. If not for your help, we might have already succumbed by now. The intuitive impulse cultivator revealed without hiding anything from Zhongxian. As for anything striking, I'm afraid I didn't see anything of that sort. However, we did encounter a few other groups during our journey, and they seemed to be looking for an oasis. I'm not too sure whether they have managed to find it or not, but we didn't see anything of that sort on our journey. Oasis. Those words made Zhongxian's eyes light up. Indeed. Since there was a desert, there was bound to be an oasis somewhere. It was highly likely that the exit would be located in the oasis. Zhongxian nodded in delight upon finding a clue as to what he should be looking for. After which, he turned his sight back to the intuitive impulse realm cultivator. How did you encounter the sand giant earlier? We were simply resting to alleviate our exhaustion and quench our thirst when that fellow suddenly appeared and attacked us, the intuitive impulse realm cultivator replied. You were trying to quench your thirst? Zhongxian frowned. If that was the triggering factor, he did drink a bit of spirit essence earlier too, but the sand giant did not appear. That's right. However, it feels like there's something really weird about this place. No matter how much water we drink, it doesn't seem to quench our thirst. Instead, the more we drink, the feebler we become, the intuitive impulse realm cultivator said bitterly. Drinking water doesn't work. Bewildered, Zhongxian flicked his wrist and took out a gourd of water. With a sip, he realized that his mouth was getting more and more parched. It was as if he was pouring flames into his body, causing it to wither bit by bit. He threw the gourd back into his storage ring and took out the spirit essence that he had collected from the forest earlier. Taking a sip of it, he felt his acupoints loosening in relaxation. The parched sensation on his tongue alleviated, reinvigorating him. I see. Zhongxian nodded in realization. From the looks of it, it seemed like water was useless there. The only replenishment one could drink was spirit essence. Elder, you have spirit essence with you? Can you share some with us? While none of those in the group were as strong as Zhongxian, they were still top-notch experts of the master-teacher continent. With their sharp eyes, they saw his lips cracking after drinking a sip of water, but drinking a sip of spirit essence brought him back to normal condition. It was apparent to them that only drinking spirit essence would alleviate their thirst and soothe their exhaustion. You want some spirit essence? I am. Since Zhongxian had collected plenty of spirit essence earlier, he was very willing to give it out to the other members of the group. However, a thought came in his mind, and he asked, Give me a moment first. You mentioned earlier that the sand giant attacked you while you were drinking water, right? The crowd nodded. May I trouble you to copy what you did when you drank water earlier? Make sure not to leave out any details. If we could attract another sand giant, it could possibly provide us with the key to escaping from this desert. Zhongxian instructed. He did not expect the sand giant to be so weak as to die with a single toss of his spear. Considering how large the desert was, it would be foolish to think that he would be able to find the oasis just by wandering around aimlessly. The wiser decision would be to rely on the native race living in this desert. However, the problem was that he would have to first attract a sand giant. The fact that he had wandered around for more than 2 hours but encountered no sand giants likely meant that there was some kind of trigger to draw it in. No one in the crowd was a fool. Upon hearing his words, they widened their eyes in realization and nodded. Very well. Zhongxian put his dragonbone divine spear aside and reverted his aura back to normal, making it appear as if he was an ordinary aureate body realm cultivator on the surface. Hula. After accomplishing all this, He turned his gaze to the crowd and gestured for them to do it. One of the cultivators swiftly flicked his wrist and took out a gourd. At their cultivation realm, there was no one who did not have a storage ring. They would usually keep a long-term supply of food and water in their storage ring in case of emergencies. The cultivator gulped down several mouthfuls of water, but the more he drank, the more withered he seemed to become. Frustrated, he tossed the gourd into the sand. Gulu gulu. When the water from the gourd flowed into the sand, it was as if water had been poured upon burning oil. A sizzling sound echoed across the desert as white smoke drifted into the air. Boom, boom, boom. As the white smoke drifted higher and higher, the crowd suddenly heard the sound of flurried footsteps sounding from afar. Two massive sand giants were bolting in their direction. They are both at sempiternal realm primary stage. Elder, you must protect us. The faces of the crowd warped in horror. It was at the behest of this elder that they had lured the other party over. While they had the numerical advantage, they knew that they did not stand a chance against two sand giants given their current fighting prowess. Rest assured, Zhongxian said confidently. Instead of whipping out his dragonbone divine spear, he pushed his feet against the burning sand and dashed toward one of the sand giants. He opened his palm wide and pressed down heavily on it. Hula! A powerful rush of zhenqi swiftly enveloped the saint giant. Roar! It seemed like the sand giant also possessed sentience. It appeared to be aware of the disadvantageous position that it was in and raised its fist in a fluster to break open the zhenqi around it. A furious storm swept across the area, and clouds of sand rose into the air. Without a doubt, the sand giant was a powerful adversary. It was no wonder the group of 18 had their hands tied dealing with it. However, it was still insufficient as an opponent for Zhongxian. The sand giant hurled punch after punch, but it was unable to breach the zhenqi barrier around it. On the other hand, the second sand giant seemed to have realized that Zhongxian was a formidable foe as well, and it charged forward in a hurry to aid its companion. Don't worry, I don't plan on leaving you alone. Zhongxian chuckled softly as he flicked his other palm at the second sand giant. Pada. The second sand giant was immediately forced to the ground, unable to move at all. Gazing coldly at the two helpless sand giants before him, Zhongxian harumphed coldly. Submit to me, and I can spare you from death. Roar. It was hard to tell whether the two sand giants had truly understood his words, but they released ferocious howls and continued clawing at the zhenqi pressing them down. It seems like you aren't going to submit to me until I show you a bit of force. Very well, I shall let you try my hand then. Seeing that he had been disregarded by the two sand giants, Zhongxian narrowed his eyes coldly. He flicked his finger and sent a surge of sword qi toward the two sand giants. Before taming a beast, one had to first exert one's dominance over the beast to show the beast that resistance was futile. Only a beast who had given up on resistance could be tamed. This was the method commonly used by most beast tamers, pummeling the beast first before dropping them incentives. While the sand giants did look a little silly, it was likely that they obeyed this convention as well. Wang. Zhongxian was intending to use his sword qi to teach the sand giants a lesson, but as soon as the sword qi sliced through the two of them, they began crumbling apart. Voila! In the blink of an eye, they had been reduced to a pile of yellow sand. The hell? Zhongxian's lips twitched. Chapter 17:12 The appearance of the oasis. Zhongxian had been planning to emulate his success back at the forest, tame a sand giant and have it lead him to the oasis. He did not think that the sand giant would be so brittle that even a casual shot of his sword qi would actually make it crumble into sand. Not even he had the ability to revert the sand back into sand giant. Isn't its spirit a little too weak? Zhongxian rubbed his glabella speechlessly. He had thought that those two fellows would at least be as tough as normal sempiternal realm cultivators, but who could have known that they would fall so easily? In terms of spirit, they were really much feebler than the artifacts that he had enchanted. I'm sorry to bother you, but can you help me lure a few more sand giants over? Zhongxian turned to look at the cultivators with an embarrassed look on his face. It had not been easy for them to lure two over, but he had ended up slaughtering them before acquiring any useful information. He really had to take note of this matter so as to not make the same mistake again. All right. The crowd nodded. Another cultivator from the crowd took out a gourd, but this time, he tossed it out without bothering to drink it. As water flowed into the desert, white smoke began drifted out from the sizzling sand. However, this time around, no sand giants appeared even after the crowd waited for quite a while. I think it would only work if you drink the water, Zhongxian said. UN. Shaking his head helplessly, the cultivator took out another gourd of water and sipped a few mouthfuls. He was still fine before he drank the water, but as soon as water entered his mouth, his face immediately turned so red that it seemed as if smoke would billow out of his face. Enduring the light-headedness, he tossed the gourd out once more. Goo. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Water flowed into the desert, and just like before, 2 sand giants were drawn over. These 2 sand giants were also at sempiternal realm primary stage, and they did not seem to possess too much intelligence. Taking a deep breath, Zhongxian engaged the 2 sand giants once more. This time around, he did not dare to exert too much strength. He focused mainly on trapping the 2 of them on the spot. The 2 sand giants continued pummeling the seals, trapping them in place, but they were unable to break free. Soul search. This time, instead of attempting to tame the sand giants, he chose to utilize his soul art. Having read all of the books in the Jiang clan and comprehended the soul quintessence, he had become highly skilled in the techniques of the soul oracles such as soul search. It was just that it disrupted the harmony of the world, so he avoided using the technique as much as he could. The sand giants before him did not seem to be natural life forms, so he did not have much hesitation using soul search on them. Hula. His consciousness dived within the body of sand, and the next moment, he found himself surrounded by darkness. Vaguely, he could see a seed of light shining in the very depths of the darkness. That is, spirit enchantment art? Zhongxian frowned. He had thought that the sand giants were a little too dull for sempiternal realm beings, but who could have known that they were the products of spirit enchantment? That explained their surprising weakness despite their cultivation. It was inevitable that the intelligence of enchanted beings would be lower compared to ordinary cultivators, so their fighting prowess would be highly lacking as well. During the confrontation with the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters in the Empire Alliance City, Wang Ying had enchanted all of the Master Teacher Pavilions, but the overall prowess of the army had still been severely limited. Wait a minute, these sand giants are made out of ordinary sand. To be able to grant ordinary sand prowess comparable to sempiternal realm primary stage cultivators. Zhongxian suddenly froze in place. These sand giants might have been a little dull, but there was no questioning the strength that they wielded. Otherwise, the group of 18 would not have faced so much trouble dealing with one. He had slain 3 of them so far, and after their spirit disintegrated, they had immediately dissolved back into ordinary sand. In other words, there was something within this desert that could enchant ordinary sand and bestow its strength comparable to sempiternal realm cultivators. That was an extremely scary notion in itself. As one who had cultivated the Heaven's Path spirit enchantment art, Zhongxian was confident that his enchantment abilities were unrivaled in the world, even when compared to Wang Ying, the head of the Spirit Awakener Guild headquarters. But even so, he knew that the limits of his ability lay in bestowing spirit upon items that had form. Toward formless entities, his enchantment was unlikely to work at all, let alone bestowing them the strength of a great sage. Peng. Deep in thought, Zhongxian lost control of his soul energy for a moment, and the flicker of life in the 2 sand giants immediately extinguished. Their bodies swiftly crumbled back into a pile of sand. Zhongxian stepped forward to take a closer look at the heap of remaining sand. They were indeed only ordinary sand. There was nothing else mixed within it. Following which, he scanned his surroundings and narrowed his eyes. It was just as he had expected. If these sand giants were products of enchantment, it was likely that the Spirit Awakener who had enchanted them knew where the exit was. In other words, the key to escaping this folded space lay in whether he was able to find the Spirit Awakener or not. Just that, how was he supposed to find this Spirit Awakener? Zhongxian fell into deep contemplation, and a moment later, realization dawned upon him. If I recall correctly, The sand giants seem to have emerged from that direction. It's likely that the Spirit Awakener is in that direction too. He had to be in direct contact with an item if he wanted to enchant it. While he did not know whether the Spirit Awakener in the desert was bound by the same restrictions as him, the direction that the sand giants had appeared from likely held a clue of some kind. Everyone, follow me. Without any hesitation, Zhongxian led them in the direction that the sand giants had appeared from. After traveling for roughly 10 minutes, he came to a halt. There was still no difference in his surroundings yet. All that was within sight was yellow sand. Zhongxian looked around him, but he was unable to find a clue whatsoever. Thus, he turned to the group of 18 and instructed, "I'll need you to attract a sand giant here once more." Upon hearing the request, bitter looks appeared on the faces all around. "Not only are you depriving us of spirit essence, you are even forcing us to drink water to dehydrate ourselves. Do you know that we'll die of thirst at this rate?" As stifled as the crowd was, they knew that the young man was their only hope of getting out of this darned place. Without any hesitation, another cultivator repeated the previous ritual. Not too long later, 2 sand giants raced over from another direction. These 2 sand giants were clearly much stronger than before. While their cultivation was still at sempiternal realm primary stage, their fighting prowess was significantly higher. At the same time, they seemed to possess greater intelligence. Knowing that it was impossible to tame the sand giants, Zhongxian killed them without any hesitation. After which, he continued walking in the direction that the sand giants had appeared from. After traveling for another 10 minutes, he had the group of 18 repeat the ritual once more. 2 more sand giants appeared, but this time, the fighting prowess of the sand giants had risen to sempiternal realm intermediate stage. It seems like the fighting prowess of the sand giants increases the closer we get to the Spirit Awakener. Seeing that there were finally some changes in their circumstances, Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. Just like that, they continued ahead. Whenever Zhongxian felt uncertain of the direction, he would have the crowd conduct the ritual of drinking water and pouring it away. Repeating the process another 10 times, the fighting prowess of the sand giants had increased to sempiternal realm advanced stage. However, it seemed like the fighting prowess of the sand giants had reached a cap and was unable to grow any further. This was the strength of the sand giants 10 minutes ago, and the strength is still equal at the moment. If I form a straight line between the 2 points that we summoned the sand giants, it's likely that the Spirit Awakener is located on another perpendicular line along the very center of this straight line. Spirit Awakeners used their souls as a medium to control their enchanted artifacts, and the strength of their control would depend on the distance between the Spirit Awakener and the enchanted artifact. Considering that the 2 sand giants were of equal strength, it meant that the extent of the Spirit Awakener's control over his enchanted artifact was identical at both points. In other words, it was likely that the Spirit Awakener was equidistant from the 2 points. The possible regions that were equidistant to the 2 points where they had summoned the sand giants were along the perpendicular line formed at the center of the straight line connecting the 2 points. To put it in simpler terms, they only had to head to the center in between the 2 points where they had summoned the sand giants and travel either up or down, and they would be able to find the Spirit Awakener. Let's go. Having confirmed a direction, Zhongxian headed to the center point and began heading upward. Some time later, just as the crowd was swiftly approaching their limit, they heard an exclamation. "Look! There's an oasis just ahead." Zhongxian quickly turned his gaze ahead. Just as the voice had said, there was a conspicuous hint of lush greenery amid the dull yellow sand of the vast desert right ahead of them. Chapter 17:13 The bizarre lakewater, covering only several dozen mu, the oasis was not too big. There was a crystal-clear lake sitting quietly at the center of the greenery. Like a beautiful gemstone embedded at the tip of a tiara, it was extremely eye-catching. A massive tree towered by the side of the lake, and its lush leaves provided coolness for the cultivators standing beneath. There's indeed an oasis. Water. I want to drink water. Unable to take it any longer, the cultivator dashed forward in desperation. Upon seeing the oasis, Zhongxian fell into a moment of contemplation. He quickly scanned his surroundings before his eyebrows shot up in horror. Wait a moment. Don't drink the water, he shouted as he rushed forward to stop them. However, too overwhelmed by thirst, the reddened-eyed crowd had already charged straight toward the lake in desperation. In the time he had spent contemplating, some of them had already scooped up a handful of water and sipped on it. Noticing Zhong Xian's intense reaction, one of the calmer cultivators turned his gaze over and asked, "Elder, what's wrong?" Even though the young man had been depriving them of spirit essence in order to lure the sand giants, it was a fact that he had brought them to the oasis. On top of that, he had shown sharp judgment far surpassing any of them. Perhaps, he might have noticed something that led him to stop them. "There's something really weird about this situation," Zhong Xian remarked as he hurriedly held back the other cultivators who had not sipped on the water yet. "Given how long it has been since you teleported in here, some groups should have discovered the secret behind the desert and rushed over to the oasis. In fact, the footsteps around show that some people have definitely been here before us. Yet, where did those people go?" He had been delayed in the forest for several hours before coming to the desert. While the secret behind the desert was rather obscure, there were bound to be some who were able to find their way over. After all, most of those who had entered the Temple of Confucius could be considered as powerhouses of the master-teacher continent. Their intelligence and sharpness far exceeded that of ordinary cultivators. However, where did those people head to? "You're right. There are indeed footsteps leading into the oasis." Taken aback, the intuitive impulse realm cultivator hurriedly looked around him and noticed some shallow footprints around the perimeter of the oasis. Unfortunately, they had become indistinct after being cloaked by a layer of sand. "Amazing, this water really works. Finally, I won't have to suffer anymore." The few who had dashed into the oasis and tested the water cried in excitement. The water that they had brought could not quench their thirst at all. In fact, it only seemed to further dehydrate them. At this point, they felt like they were on the verge of bursting into flames. "Let me give it a try too." Upon hearing those words, the other cultivators whom Zhong Xian had stopped immediately dashed forward, wanting to get a taste of the water as well. However, just as they were about to drink the water, the middle-aged man who had first drunk the water suddenly began convulsing wildly, and white smoke rose from his body. "Ah!" A hoarse cry of agony escaped from his throat. It was as if something was strangling his neck, causing him to roll frantically on the ground with his eyes bulging in desperation. But the more he rolled, the more smoke seemed to rise from his body. It felt as if he would combust into flames at any moment. The middle-aged man was not the only victim. Another 3 cultivators who had rushed ahead of the pack to drink the water had fallen to the ground as well. White smoke began drifting from their bodies, and it looked like they were being put through inhuman pain. "This is really bad." Alarmed, Zhong Xian hurriedly flicked a surge of Heaven's Path Shenqi toward the middle-aged man, intending to alleviate his conditions. However, before his Heaven's Path Shenqi could reach him, the rolling figure suddenly cracked in the middle. Voila! He was reduced to a heap of yellow sand. This. Horrified by the sight before them, the crowd hurriedly backed away from the water with pale faces. If the cultivators before them had been burned into cinders or reduced into skeleton, they could still have accepted the conclusion. When they chose to enter the Temple of Confucius, they had already resolved themselves that they might not come back alive. However, these men had been reduced to yellow sand. What on earth was going on? To be reduced to sand upon death. It could not be that the vast desert around them was the remains of countless corpses, could it? Just the thought left goosebumps rising all over their bodies, and terror seeped into the very depths of their soul. "Elder, save me." With the middle-aged man being reduced to a heap of yellow sand, the other 3 cultivators pleaded with horror imprinted in their eyes. They had entered the Temple of Confucius with the intention of overcoming their bottlenecks and progressing to higher ranks. Who could have known that it would actually bring them so close to the jaws of death? Zhong Xian was also startled by the happenings, but he knew that it was not the time for him to fall into a daze. He quickly rushed to the 3 of them and placed his fingers on them. His Heaven's Path Shenqi swiftly surged into the bodies of the trio. Voila! As soon as his Shenqi entered their bodies, he immediately sensed a bundle of flames devastating each of their bodies, threatening to burn them into cinders. Humph! With a harumph, Zhongxian channeled his Heaven's Path Zhenqi to quell those bundles of flames. Tzzzz. As soon as his Heaven's Path Zhenqi collided with the bundles of flames, he immediately felt a powerful force corroding his Heaven's Path Zhenqi, seemingly attempting to combust his Zhenqi into flames. Break! Furiously infusing more and more Heaven's Path Zhenqi into the three of their bodies, Zhongxian's body began to take on a golden sheen, as if turning into a moving golden sculpture. His Zhenqi, physical body, and primordial spirit were able to endure even the might of the Empyrean heavenly flame. While the bundles of flames in the trio's bodies were a little queer, they still were not sufficient to hurt him. Under the furious onslaught of his Zhenqi, the bundles of flames were finally quelled. Feeling that they were finally out of death's jaws, the pale-faced trio crumbled to the ground with a mixture of relief and trepidation. They quickly kneeled onto the ground and kowtowed to Zhongxian. "Elder, thank you for saving our lives. There's no need to stand on ceremony," Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. Turning to the crowd, he said, "There's something really queer about this place, so let's not stay around the lake. For the time being, let's back out of the oasis." Even if Zhongxian had not said such words, the crowd would have been too frightened to remain around the lake anymore. Death was not that frightening of a concept to them anymore, but to be burned down into yellow sand, such that every last trace of their existence would vanish, this was an extremely sinister way of dying that they could not even bear the thought of. Unlike the rest of the crowd, Zhongxian did not back out of the oasis. Instead, he walked up to the heap of sand remaining of the middle-aged man and pinched a handful of it up. Leaning in, he examined it closely. The middle-aged man had been burned so cleanly that not even his clothes were left. Had he not seen it with his own eyes, he would have never believed that a person could simply vanish just like that. "Elder, what do we do now?" An intuitive impulse realm cultivator stepped forward to examine the heap of sand as well, but he was unable to deduce anything from it. Thus, he could only turn his gaze to Zhongxian. "Take this spirit essence and let the crowd drink it." Zhongxian flicked his wrist and tossed several gourds over. This was the spirit essence that he had gathered from the forest, and it could alleviate the thirst of the crowd for the time being. It was not that he had intentionally kept it away from the crowd, but it appeared that one who had drunk the spirit essence would not be able to attract the sand giants anymore. As such, he had been left with no choice but to keep it away from them so that they could reach the oasis. However, since they had already reached their destination, there was no reason for him to keep it from them anymore. "Thank you, Elder." Taking the spirit essence, the intuitive impulse realm cultivator hurriedly passed it around the crowd, and after gulping down large mouthfuls of it, their thirst was finally quenched. They could not help but turn to Zhongxian with looks of gratitude. Paying no heed to the crowd, after Zhongxian had finished examining the sand grains, he began walking around the perimeter of the lake. A cold air was emanating from the lake before him. Standing beside it, he could not feel the slightest hint of heat despite being in the midst of a sweltering desert. At the same time, the lake was also extraordinarily clear. It looked so innocent that it did not seem to have anything to do with the flames that had killed the middle-aged man earlier. Despite scanning the perimeter of the lake, Zhongxian was unable to find anything peculiar about it. There were also no animals or the like within the oasis, so the matter could not really be attributed to anything else. Seeing that he had reached an impasse, Zhongxian walked up to the lake and scooped up the water, just like what the middle-aged man and the trio had done earlier. "Elder, be careful." Seeing that Zhongxian had scooped up the water, everyone leaped in fright. "It's fine," Zhongxian reassured them with a smile. Even the Empyrean heavenly flame was unable to hurt his body in the least, so there was no way that bundle of flames could pose any threat to him. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. Looking at the clear water that he had scooped up in his both hands, he scanned it using both his eye of insight and spiritual perception, but he was still unable to find anything wrong with it. Perplexed, he leaned in and sipped a mouthful of the water. "Elder, be careful." The faces of the crowd turned pale in horror upon seeing the unbelievable sight before them. The middle-aged man had died shortly after drinking the water. What were they supposed to do if something happened to the elder before them as well? Chapter 17:14 The man-murdering tree swallowing the water did alleviate his thirst. Squatting quietly on the spot, Zhongxian focused his attention intently on the internal state of his body. As soon as the slightest spark of flame appeared in his body, he would quell it right away. But even after waiting for a while, nothing happened at all. It was as if the water was completely ineffective on him. When he stood up once more, there was a deep frown on his forehead. If the flame had appeared in his body, he might have been able to trace down its origins. However, with nothing appearing at all, he had no idea how he should proceed on from here. Could this be something similar to the yellow water of the netherworld, which he had encountered in ancient sage Ran Qiu's ancient domain? Was the water poisonous to others but harmless to him? "Elder, are you fine?" the intuitive impulse realm cultivator asked carefully. Seeing there was no white smoke puffing out of the young man's head, and there was no cry of agony either, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. "I'm fine," Zhongxian replied with a nod. "That's a relief." It was really a horrifying sight to see a living person being reduced to yellow sand. If not for the fact that I have traveled here together with him, I would have thought that he was a sand giant in disguise, the intuitive impulse realm cultivator remarked fearfully. Sand giant in disguise? Being reduced into yellow sand. A flash sparked through Zhongxian's mind as a thought surfaced in his head. He quickly turned to the intuitive impulse realm cultivator and asked, "You said earlier that you only found a sand giant after traveling for 4 hours. In other words, you didn't encounter any sand giants in the first 4 hours at all, did you?" Yeah, that's right. The intuitive impulse cultivator was slightly taken aback by Zhongxian's question, but he swiftly nodded affirmatively in response. From the moment they woke up after being teleported out of Tsufu, they had been in the midst of this desert. There was no danger at all initially, but on the 4th hour, they suddenly encountered a sand giant. They had mentioned this right from the moment they met, so it was not a secret at all. To only meet a sand giant on the 4th hour. Could it be that the sand giants are actually the remains of the dead cultivators? Zhongxian murmured with a grim look in his eyes. It was weird that the sand giants only appeared 4 hours after the opening of the folded space. Could it be that the first batch of cultivators had only found the oasis 4 hours after the opening and became the first group of sand giants? Remains of dead cultivators? The crowd was stunned. Thinking about it, everything seemed to fit together. As horrifying as the idea was, it was actually plausible. The middle-aged man had been reduced to sand after his death, which was the very reason that they had thought about sand giants in the first place. "We'll know the truth with a quick test," Zhongxian said with narrowed eyes. He walked back to the heap of sand that the middle-aged man turned into and placed his finger on it. In the next moment, his consciousness was plunged into a world of darkness. As expected, Zhongxian frowned grimly. The fact that he was brought into this dark space while using his spirit enchantment art meant that it was possible to enchant life into the heap of sand. Focusing his attention, he enchanted a spark of flame into the heap of sand, breaking the darkness within this dark space. Voila! The heap of yellow sand slowly rose to its feet, becoming a massive sand giant. However, it only wielded the prowess of an aureate body realm cultivator. It's no wonder enchanted sand could wield the strength of sempiternal realm cultivators. Zhongxian widened his eyes in realization. Previously, he had been perplexed by how enchanted sand could wield such great fighting prowess. From the looks of it, it seemed like the sand that had made up the sand giants was not ordinary sand but the corpses of cultivators. In other words, the sand giants that they had been fighting with all that while were actually the experts who had been reduced to sand by the oasis. In other words, they had been fighting the dead. Wait a moment, if that's the case, where in the world is the spirit awakener? A doubt surfaced in Zhongxian's mind as he quickly scanned his surroundings. If his deduction held through, the spirit awakener had to be in the oasis. However, other than the lake, a field of grass, and a towering tree, there was nothing in sight. Even I have to come into direct contact with the heap of sand in order to enchant it. There's no way the spirit awakener was able to enchant spirits into heaps of sand from a distance away. Zhongxian rubbed his glabella in frustration. He felt like he had already gathered the clues required to solve the puzzle, but everything still remained an enigma to him. Somehow, he was unable to form a complete picture with the clue to see through the veil of mystery. And the very crux of that was the Spirit Awakener. Until he found the Spirit Awakener, this matter would remain a mystery to him, and he would not be able to find the exit out of this desert world. He had also observed the lake very closely earlier. Crystal clear, he was able to see to the very bottom of the lake with ease, but there was no exit in sight. As such, it was very likely that the exit was not located in the oasis. Earlier, the middle-aged man was reduced to yellow sand after drinking the water, but nothing happened to me when I consumed it. Also, it's only possible to enchant the corpses after they have been reduced to heaps of sand. If there's nothing wrong with the water, it has to be something above the water then. Zhongxian frowned in bewilderment as he turned his gaze to the surface of the water once more. Only those who drank the water from the oasis would be reduced to sand and become enchanted into sand giants. He felt that as long as he could understand how those cultivators were turned into yellow sand, he would be able to find out where the Spirit Awakener was hiding. Thus, he scooped up another mouthful of water and examined it closely, but he still found nothing worth noting. It was just simple water with nothing inside. Just as he was about to give up, a slight breeze suddenly blew through the oasis. The tree towering by the lake swayed along with the breeze, its leaves rustling noisily. Hoo! The cotton blooming all over the towering tree fell into the lake with a light tug of the breeze, and they floated quietly on the surface of the water. A moment later, they dissolved apart and vanished in the water. Could that be the culprit? Zhongxian narrowed his eyes. He hurriedly walked up to the towering tree and pinched a handful of cotton out. Tzzzz. To his astonishment, it felt as if a bundle of flames was burning on his palm. This bundle of flames bore a striking similarity to the flames that he had found in the bodies of the trio. Just as I thought. Zhongxian nodded in realization. It was no wonder those before them had ended up bursting into flames after drinking the water, whereas he remained completely fine. Find authorized novels in Webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click for visiting. It seemed like the key lay in these cotton buds. Only when one drank water laced with cotton would they be reduced to yellow sand and transform into sand giant. When he checked the water, the cotton had already dissolved into the lake, so it was no wonder he had been unable to find anything at all. He had finally found the cause behind the mysterious flames, but where was the Spirit Awakener? Zhongxian walked up to the tree and examined it closely. However, there was nothing peculiar in sight. He raised his hand and placed it lightly on the tree trunk. A moment later, a smile crept onto his lips. He leaned into the tree and whispered, "You are the culprit, aren't you?" Hualala. Another breeze brushed across the oasis, gently shaking the tree. It was as if the tree was feigning ignorance to Zhongxian's words. "You know, it doesn't really matter to me whether you feign ignorance or not," Zhongxian remarked leisurely. With a flick of his wrist, the infernal black saber materialized in his grasp, and with flash of cold light, it slashed right for the massive tree. "Let's see how you are going to feign ignorance after I chop you down, Hula." But before the infernal black saber could come into contact with the tree, a hurried sharp gale of wind burst through the air. Glancing upward, Zhongxian saw a tree branch darting right for his head like a piercing spear. The movement of the tree branch was extremely swift and forceful. In terms of prowess, it was actually on par with an attack from a sempiternal realm consummation expert. Nevertheless, Zhongxian still dodged the attack easily with a sidestep. Su. However, it did not seem like the tree was willing to let him get away scot-free. Dozens of other tree branches suddenly shot forward and pierced right in Zhongxian's direction, as if the charge of innumerable ferocious dragons. The force of their movements left behind lingering black streaks in the air. Impressive. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes as the earlier smile vanished from his face. With a flick of his finger, he sealed the space around him to temporarily fend off the tree branches. Following which, he raised the infernal black saber and executed hundreds of slashes in the blink of an eye. It was apparent that the tree wielded strength on par with sempiternal realm consummation experts. He had to make sure to tread carefully, or else he might end up losing his life. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.